By 2030, up to 800 million jobs could be replaced by AI. In the construction sector, we like to think we're special, and maybe we are. There are significant challenges to implementing AI and technology within the construction industry, but it's highly likely there will be significant changes to the way our industry operates. Last week, I spent 2 full days going through over 100 separate invoices from a supplier. I had to go through every single invoice and try to match them to the correct purchase order and delivery docket. It was an absolute waste of time. Anybody with experience in the construction industry knows that boring admin work like this takes up a large proportion of your day. This is the exact type of work that all the experts out there are saying that AI is going to automate. Our salaries cost companies money. Admin work costs companies money. There's a huge financial incentive for these companies to automate work like this. The more of this admin work that gets automated, the less construction managers, the less project engineers that you'll need to run the same construction project. What does this mean for us? This means less jobs, less demand for construction managers, and ultimately lower salaries. Are we powerless to accept this? Is there anything we can do to change this trend? Well, my dissatisfying answer is maybe. Maybe they're going to develop some super powerful AI in the next couple of years that automates all of our jobs and there's nothing we can do about it. Or maybe not. My plan is pretty simple. I see AI as a tool. The same way that calculators were a tool that helped us do maths, AI is going to be a tool that helps us manage projects. I believe the construction managers who are going to succeed and going to prosper with this new trend are the ones who can use it, the ones that you can use AI tools and AI systems to improve their job performance. The people who can use AI will excel, the people who can't will fail. If you want to get started equipping yourself with the skills you need to exceed in this new way of working, the future of the construction industry, then in this course, we're going to walk you through all the different ways you can use ChatGPT to help manage and run a construction project. The course is broken down into 4 separate sections. Each section is designed with a specific learning outcome. So in section 1, the goal is to introduce you to the basics of ChatGPT. Section 2, the goal is to teach you specific uses of ChatGPT. So different ways you can use ChatGPT. Section 3, we take these uses of ChatGPT and then we apply them to the different construction project management fundamentals before Section 4 quickly summarizing and recapping what we've learned. Okay, so in Section 1, the introduction, we're going to talk about what ChatGPT is and how to use it, how to get started interfacing with it, the capabilities and limitations of ChatGPT, so what it's good at, what it's not so good at. We'll give you a useful prompt set, and then we'll talk about how to actually set up and start using ChatGPT. But in section 2, we'll talk about the best ways to use ChatGPT. So we're not talking specifically about construction management here. We're just talking about the best ways to use ChatGPT. So we'll talk about general uses of ChatGPT, how to effectively prompt ChatGPT, using ChatGPT to write and prepare content, using it to summarize information, using it to enhance communication, using it for data analysis, brainstorming, and then finally, how to use it to research and educate yourself on different topics. Then in section 3, we're going to talk about the specific applications to construction management. So in section 2, we already covered how to use ChatGPT for writing, content creation, brainstorming, these sorts of things. And we're going to talk about in section 3, applying these uses to specific domains of construction management. So we'll talk about scope management, design management, estimating, cost control, project scheduling, procurement, contracts, quality management, completions, and finally risk management. And for each of these different domains of construction management, I'll give you specific examples of uses. Then in section 4, we're just quickly going to wrap up and summarize what we've done. Okay, I always get a ton of questions about this, but yes, the course comes with a certificate of completion. To get the certificate of completion, you have to complete 100% of the course content, including any assignments and quizzes. So before you ask me about the certificate of completion, just check that your course progress bar is at 100%, and then you'll be able to download the certificate of completion. If there's one thing I can encourage you to do throughout the course is to apply what you're learning. It's important to understand the theory. It's important to understand some different concepts like how to use ChatGPT and then how to apply it. But you're always going to get the most out of a course like this is if you take what you're learning and you start trying to apply it, start trying to use it, and start trying to figure out what it's all about, how to use ChatGPT, and the best ways to apply it specifically in your job. Before we get started, I've got a couple of tips for how to get the most out of the course. The goal of this course is to accelerate your career in construction management by learning a new skill, which is how to use ChatGPT. So I want to quickly talk about some ways you can maximize your success of achieving this outcome. First thing you should do is you should actually complete the course. Now, I know it's hard to make time to sit down and watch a couple of hours or watch a series of lectures. So you should try and make it as easy as possible for yourself. Use the mobile app, watch it while you're going for a walk, listen to it while you're driving, listen to it while you're on the train. Well, probably don't watch it while you're driving because that would be dangerous. However, you could just listen to it on audio, but the goal is to complete the course. So you want to make it as easy as possible for yourself to do it. The next thing you want to do is you want to apply your knowledge. Now, theory is important. However, if you don't apply it, it's worth nothing. Make sure from today, you start using ChatGPT and you start experimenting with different ways you can use it to improve your job performance. The final thing I want to recommend you do is you share your results. Now, part of why we take courses is to get certificate of completions and to show our network that we've mastered a certain set of skills. So I encourage you, once you've completed the course, share it on your LinkedIn, share it with your network, make people aware that you're going on this journey of growing and learning. Okay, before we get started, I've attached to the course notes an example set of ChatGPT prompts. These are prompts you can use on your own project. You can just copy them in, or you could also see them as examples of what good prompts are, and you can start to see the type of things you can ask ChatGPT. So attached to the course notes is a copy of this prompt list to make it easy for you to start using ChatGPT even before you've taken the course. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the role AI is currently playing in construction management. We're not going to be talking about hypotheticals. We're going to be talking about current practical applications. For me, the really frustrating thing I find talking about AI is everyone's talking about AI in these generic terms. They talk about how they make these big claims, how it's going to change everything, how it's going to revolutionize schedules, it's going to revolutionize quality control. In 5 years, there's going to be no more jobs in construction management. And frankly, I think a lot of these claims are just projections about the future, which are almost certainly going to be wrong. That's why in this video, I want to talk through and go through some current examples of how AI is actually being used. These are things people are currently paying for on their projects because they provide a service that generates value. So I'm not going to be talking about what I think is going to happen with AI. Sure, I've got opinions, but I want to talk about what's actually happening now in our industry. Let's look at what are some of the ways AI is currently generating value in our industry. The first one is the Boston Dynamics robot. Now, I've put links to all of these websites in the slide notes, so make sure you download them and click on them, or just Google search these different companies and you'll be able to find out way more information and see more detail in some of their specific uses and case studies. First one is the Boston Dynamics robot. Now, this is a site inspection robot that's been created that can basically walk around by itself. It sort of looks like a dog, and video and record and scan things with LiDAR, and it can pick up really, really accurate project information. For example, it can walk around a building site and check progress by scanning the data around it so you can see exactly how far works have progressed, or you could also use it to access hard to inspect places. For example, rather than organizing all the headaches of going through a confined space process, if you need to inspect a drainage pit that's hard to access, you could simply put the robot in there and get it to do the inspection for you. So there's some real ways that this robot is currently generating value for the industry. The second one is Doxel. Now, Doxel does an incredibly similar thing to what the Boston's Dynamic robot does. It performs site inspections, it monitors progress, and it performs quality control checks. But with their advanced software, they'll actually map out the structure of a building, and based on their scans, you can see minute project detail and accurate project progress in much, much more detail based on their back-end software, where they can map out the structure of a building, and using their scans, they can work out exactly what's installed, exactly what's not installed, and the current progress of the project. The next one, again, a super similar application, is BuildDots, which uses AI-powered computer vision to track progress. So rather than Boston Dynamics robot or the Doxel, which performs site inspections, BuildDots actually has individual cameras set up in all the different places on a project and continually monitors progress and breaks it down in incredible amounts of detail. For example, you've got a camera in a room, you can see whether the door's installed, you can see whether the painting's being completed, you can see if there's any defects, and it tracks all this in a centralized system, again, just generating more and more information and data and providing really, really accurate progress reports. And finally, my personal favorite run is a software called Alice. Now, what Alice does is it adds in uncertainty to project scheduling. I think this is super fascinating because when we go through and we create a schedule, we're making all these assumptions. What Alice lets you do is, based on your outline of your schedule, it identifies all the decisions, the constraints, the assumptions, and it allows you to simulate a vast range of different options. And anybody who's worked on a project understands how much uncertainty there is and how much we have to work out smarter ways to address, simulate, understand, and ultimately manage this uncertainty. And Alice is an AI scheduling software which helps you simulate all the different what-if scenarios and identify the risks and how we can address them. So it basically adds in uncertainty to project scheduling. Interestingly, you've probably observed that most of these softwares were relatively similar, except for Alice, which was a relatively unique use case for project scheduling. All of the other softwares were versions of computer vision, data collection, and then using AI to manage this data set. And I think that's an interesting point, which we'll discuss in the next section when we look at the limitations of using AI in construction. That part of the problem is projects just lack data. They either have a lot of data that doesn't matter and not enough of the information that matters, the information that's really going to drive better decisions and project outcomes. Okay, so now we've looked at how AI is currently being used in the construction sector. Let's go through some challenges to implementing it further. We're going to individually go through a series of challenges AI faces to taking on a bigger and bigger role in the construction sector. The first one is a lack of useful data. Now, projects generate a lot of information. For example, an earthworks project will have survey data, there'll be historic rainfall data, there'll be data like the number of people on site. But ultimately, if we're going to use AI to improve decision-making processes, improve project outcomes, we need useful data. So we need data that reflects current project progress, future project risks, current project expenditure. Ultimately, we need to collect data that matters. Now, data that matters is data that informs decision-making. And with each project being unique and different, with specific contextual nuances, ultimately, to train something like a generative AI on a set of data so it can make useful predictions about the future is always going to be a challenge if we don't have a lack of useful data. Data that has been used in the past to make better decisions that we can train the AI on. So that's a critical point with training any large language model like ChatGPT, is you need a data set that's mapped to outcomes to train it on, to show it what good decisions were in the past and how these map to project outcomes. And ultimately, in the construction sector, there's a lot of data. There's not a lot of useful data. The other issue we have is a lot of the data quality. So data might be in the wrong format. It might not be measuring the specific thing we need. And we might not be able to map it against project outcomes. So to train any generative AI like ChatGPT, We need to be able to train it on a data set and show it the trends in the data and how it mapped to correct outcomes. The second issue is that construction project management involves massive decisions. Projects are expensive, they're disruptive, they take years, and ultimately we rely on the expert judgment and ability to understand nuanced context that humans have. So for example, if someone's got 30 years of experience in the construction industry and they've managed the feasibility study, they've gone through all the data, they've come to the conclusion that proceeding with a project is a good idea based on the cost-benefit ratio and all the data behind it, and they can explain exactly how they've arrived at a decision. That answer is going to give you a lot more confidence than an AI simply spitting out a ratio saying, here's the decision we've made, the project's profitable, it should go ahead, but they couldn't clearly articulate or explain how they've arrived at that decision. Ultimately, we're going to trust the judgment of the person who's experienced, has made good decisions like this in the past, and is going to be responsible for this massive decision. The big problem with AI in the construction sector is often we have to make massive decisions, and are we, at this point in time, willing to trust something like AI to make them for us? And it's not just money decisions, it's safety decisions. So deciding if a specific activity is safe to proceed with based on a risk assessment. Would we ever really be willing to outsource that decision to AI? I don't know, potentially in the future. The way it currently stands is we trust individuals who've had experience and proven they could do these things in the past. The next challenge to using AI in construction management is the uniqueness of each project. Each project has a specific context, different to other projects, and there's always specific nuances that are going to affect how we choose to manage the project. By definition, a project is a temporary endeavor in a unique environment. It's something that hasn't been done before. That's why, and this sort of relates back to the first point I was making about the lack of quality data. Sure, there's lots of information available about a project, but is it the information we need, and is it tailored to our project? The nuance, the context, the specifics of the project make it hard to create generic responses or generic direction about what we should do. That's why we need to address the specifics of a project when we're managing it. Building a 2-lane highway in the middle of the city is completely different to building the exact same road in a different location. Maybe the biggest challenge on one project is disrupting stakeholders, when the biggest challenge on another project is the environmental impact on native fauna. Again, every project is completely unique, and we need to address the specifics of the project, which is difficult to do if we don't have a lot of high quality, tailored data that's mapped to correct decisions made in the past where we can train an AI model on. Setting up any new sort of AI system or software for that system, for that fact, requires high initial investment. It requires money and time to set up. Without really good proven use cases of how AI is currently being used to manage projects better, there's always going to be the question of investing our time to set up an AI application for a project. Is it going to yield benefits? With that same amount of time and money, would you be better off investing it into planning the project earlier on or setting up an AI system? And as currently there are no really good use cases of AI being fundamental to construction management, there's always going to be a level of uncertainty around exploring it and implementing it on your project. The next challenge I see for AI in the construction sector is resistance to change. The construction sector is notoriously bad at adopting new technologies and changing the way we do things. Why is that the case? Partly because construction management is a big exercise in managing risk and uncertainty. Projects are temporary endeavors in uncertain environments. There's lots and lots of things that can go wrong. On top of that, we've got an industry with relentless competition between contractors and razor-thin margins. The attitude of any good construction manager is they're thinking about what could go wrong and what could they do about it. That's the attitude most construction managers have. They're not necessarily thinking about disruptive innovation. So there's always going to be some level of resistance to change if you're worrying about what could go wrong, which is obviously a super important thing for construction managers to do. There's always going to be more uncertainty rolling out new technologies, and as anyone who's worked in the construction sector long enough knows that things can go super badly. So we want to try and avoid these negative consequences, so we're always going to be hesitant about change and implementing new things. The next one we've got to think about are regulatory and ethical concerns. If we're outsourcing decision making, quality control checks, things like that to AI, are we going to be confident that the AI is working as intended? For example, say we want to use AI to complete a pre-pour inspection as part of a massive structure. Are we really going to be confident that the AI is going to correctly identify all the issues in the same way that a skilled civil engineer performing that same inspection of the reinforcement would be able to? And on top of that, if something goes wrong and they miss a critical piece, who is accountable? Who's to blame? Is the software developer liable? Is the person who ordered the software liable? It's an important point. A lot about construction management is passing on risk and responsibility. If we're outsourcing really, really important tasks to an AI system, are they actually going to be liable for it, or can they be liable for it? On top of that, we have to worry about some of the ethical concerns. So whether we outsource information to an AI system, do they then have access to all our data? Who owns the data? There's privacy issues with that. Then also, if the AI model has certain biases built into it, are we sure we understand what those biases are? And are we sure we understand how the AI is making decisions? Ultimately, a lot of it comes down to accountability and liability. So are we going to be confident with an AI making super important decisions that could potentially have $1 million, $10 million, or $100 million impacts? There are some important roadblocks that we need to consider when rolling out AI in construction management, but I'm sure over time these issues are slowly but surely going to be addressed by people like us who are working on these problems and trying to understand the role that AI is going to have in construction management. None of these problems I see as showstoppers or roadblocks. I think it's just a matter of time before we understand what AI is good at, what its limitations are, and the role it's going to play in shaping the future of our industry. Before we can get too ahead of ourselves looking at how to use ChatGPT to master construction project management, I want to just invest a little bit of time in understanding how ChatGPT works. The goal of this section is to simply understand ChatGPT. Maybe it's a little bit too much detail, and maybe we're going to cover things that aren't necessarily going to be 100% translated to your specific job performance, but I just think it's really valuable to take a bit of time to understand exactly what ChatGPT is. In this section, we're going to understand what ChatGPT is. We'll talk a little bit about what generative AI is, and just go through a brief history of AI and where we're up to in the process. And I think you'll be surprised how long AI has actually been around and had people working on it. What is generative AI? So generative AI is an AI model that can generate new content. That's all it is. So it's anything where we can give it direction, instruction, and it can generate text, images, music, and so on and so forth. So you've probably seen a lot of these different generative AI models floating around in recent history. Think about the ones where you can simply put in a text prompt and it creates an image. Or you can, like ChatGPT, you can put it in a text prompt and get a text-based response. ChatGPT is a chat-based AI, and the GPT part of it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer Architecture, and it's been developed by OpenAI. The way it works is, as a user, we input a text-based response. So we can ask it, how long did the Roman Empire last? And it'll generate a text-based response based on this prompt. So it'll tell us the Roman Empire lasted from whenever to whenever. So that's pretty much how it works. Now, with the recent releases of the new ChatGPT revisions, you can also get images as responses. You can also get audio as responses. How it works is it pretty much understands what you're asking it to do. So it takes on the context of the prompt, but also the history of the chat you've had with it. So each individual chat you open with ChatGPT, It'll record all the previous prompts you've sent it and create an overall context of the conversation. And based on that and the information that it's been trained on and had access to in the past, it'll be able to generate a text-based response. There's a lot of different use cases for ChatGPT. So we can use it to create new content. We can use it to automate customer service. We can use it for education and training. We can use it for programming. So it can actually be used to write code or debug existing code. We can use it for research, and we can also use it to automate administrative tasks. Generative AIs all work in the same basic way. They get trained on a large data set. So there's some sample set of data that ChatGPT got trained on. So this could be thousands of different websites, data sets, articles, books, resources. So ChatGPT's analyzed all this data, and it's gone through and recognized patterns in the data. So it's looked at thousands of different, or probably billions of different sentences. It's worked out patterns in how these sentences are formed, and then it's recognized consistent trends in the data. Once it's been trained on a data set and it's recognized trends and patterns, it then is able to use these trends and patterns and extrapolate them out and form new responses. So this is the generation part of it. So there's the training part of it, then there's the generative part of it. So based on its research, based on the data it's been trained on, so thousands of different articles, it can then take this information and based on a prompt you feed it, generate a response. So it's taken the patterns it's previously identified, and when you make a request of it, it's then able to generate a response. Now I want to quickly talk about the history of ChatGPT and AI. Now, I don't think this is necessarily going to help you as a construction manager, but I think it's just an interesting overview to understand where we're up to in our AI journey, and then it's been around longer than you previously may have thought. The concept of AI dates back to the 1950s, where Alan Turing made the hypothesis that you could eventually create a computer that replicated human intelligence. In the 1960s, there was some early optimism around AI, and they generated a program or a natural language processing algorithm called ELIZA. After this initial enthusiasm, however, there wasn't really a lot of progress, and in the 1970s, a period known as the AI winter began. In the 1980s, however, there was a revival into AI with the concept of expert systems, and there started to be more investigation and funding, and the initial excitement of AI was reborn. In the 1990s, when the internet era began, there was further advancements as computational speeds increased, there was more funding, and there was also access to bigger and bigger data sets. Building on the 1990s with these access to these bigger data sets, there was more and more research in the early 2000s into how these big data sets could be used for machine learning. So the idea was that you take this massive set of data, you train an AI model on it, then you get it to identify patterns, and then eventually predict future responses. So that's the idea of machine learning, and that started in the 2000s. In the 2010s is when we saw AI start to really go mainstream. So this is when these initial research into things like machine learning started to have applications in our everyday lives. So this is things like Siri, if you're an Apple user, or Alexa, if you're an Amazon user. These were built on the same concept of machine learning. They suddenly started to become used in our everyday lives. Then suddenly, here we are in the 2020s with the release of ChatGPT and this understanding of how powerful this technology actually is. Conversations started to shift to how is AI going to change our society. There's no doubt that the applications and the use of these sorts of tools, the question is now shifting to how is it going to change our society and what are the ethics of actually using it. Currently, ChatGPT is being used across a range of different industries. It's being used in customer service, it's being used in content creation if you work in marketing, it's being used in education to help teach and explain new concepts, it's being used in healthcare, it's being used in software development, particularly with coding. It's particularly good at that, and it's being used to automate specific business operations. This then brings us to the construction sector. How can AI be used to deliver better projects? That's a fascinating question, and I'm going to explore in this course the different applications of ChatGPT to construction project management. Now, I'm still learning about ChatGPT and I'm absolutely fascinated with how it's going to be used to change our industry. If you've got smart applications for it, or you've got other ways you think I've missed in this course, make sure to send me a message and let me know how you're using it to make your life as a construction manager easier. I've already spoken about some of the challenges of rolling out AI in the construction sector. Now in this section, I just sort of want to speak generally about the capabilities and limitations of ChatGPT as a tool. ChatGPT has some important capabilities and limitations that we should have at the front of our mind when we're working with it. It's not perfect, and it does have some things we need to address, but it's also got some really, really strong points. I think if we better understand what it's good at and what it's not good at, it helps us frame how we use it. If we're aware of certain shortfalls, then we can make sure we're thinking about those when we're using it. And if we know what it's really, really good at, we can focus on getting it to do more of that. So when we talk about ChatGPT and its capabilities and limitations, we're really answering the question, what can ChatGPT do and where does it require human oversight? So where do we need to pay particular attention when using it? So the first things I'd say that it's just really, really good at is text generation. It's good at writing content. It's good at writing articles. It's good at writing generic information based on an outline. It's really, really good at that. And it's actually really, really good at language and grammar. So if you want to translate between different languages, if you want it to proofread things, it's particularly good at language and grammar. The next thing it's really good at is providing the user support and personalization while they're doing other tasks. So if you need to learn about something quickly, it's really, really useful for that. If you want to learn about electrical transformers when you're working on a renewable energy project, and you just want a quick definition, it's really, really good at that. It's also good at customer support functions, so it is working through a series of predetermined automated responses, and it's good at tailoring information to your specific preferences. So say you get given a big article and you want to summarize it into short dot points, it's particularly good at things like that. It's also really good at programming, so writing code and debugging code. So this is particularly important if you're using things like Microsoft Excel and want to write a macro. It's really good at taking a description of a functionality you want to create and turning this into code you can copy directly into Excel. But this same logic applies to other software tools as well. So as construction managers, probably don't use a ton of different softwares, but Excel, things like that, it's very, very good at. Okay, some of the limitations and things we need to be aware of. Number one is data security. So when you upload information to ChatGPT, OpenAI has access to your data. That's really important to be aware of. Say you're working on a project and you've got access to sensitive information. I personally wouldn't feel comfortable uploading that to ChatGPT. And you have to be aware of what our clients want and the nature of the information we're dealing with. You wouldn't want to go uploading a whole lot of information where you've signed a non-disclosure agreement to say that you're not going to share it. You shouldn't upload that to ChatGPT. The next one is context. So ChatGPT relies on the context you've given it. So whenever you're using ChatGPT, you have to make a massive effort in teaching it the context. Us as humans, when we're exposed to new information, we always interpret it in a framework or context. ChatGPT doesn't have this, or it doesn't have it nearly as well as we have it. So when a new project member starts on your project, they've already heard about the project, they know the business, they know the organization, there's all this implied context they have at the back of their minds. ChatGPT doesn't have that. So everything you get it to do, you have to give it a ton of context. And we'll talk about that when we talk about prompt engineering. The other thing, it can sometimes lose the context. So it'll respond and have forgotten the previous context. So it's not 100% reliable in maintaining context. The other thing is ChatGPT is trained on a set data set. That data set will provide ChatGPT bias. So ChatGPT is always going to be biased to respond based on the data set it's been trained on. So it might, with new information, changing things, ChatGPT, if it doesn't have access to that data, won't be able to respond. The next one is awareness and misinformation. So ChatGPT, as I was saying just before, has been trained on a set of data. If it doesn't have access to real-time data or changing information, it's going to respond incorrectly or not be able to respond to certain questions. For example, if you ask ChatGPT, what's the weather going to be like tomorrow? It's not going to be able to answer because it doesn't have access to real-time weather information. If you ask ChatGPT what was the weather like 30 years ago, depending if it's previously been provided access to that data, it'll be able to respond much more accurately. So we have to be aware that ChatGPT does not currently, this might change in new revisions, but have access to real-time information. The second one, and I've noticed this a couple of times in ChatGPT, that it can just flat out be wrong. So I was asking it to perform calculations about the weight of steel and concrete. I looked at the calculations and it had calculated the answer incorrectly. Now, as ChatGPT is being trained, new revisions are being released, I haven't actually seen this recently. So it seems like the accuracy of the information it's providing is increasingly better. You just have to keep this at the front of your mind though, that ChatGPT can in fact be wrong. The next one I want to talk about is emotional intelligence. ChatGPT doesn't have any emotional intelligence, so it's not good at dealing with sensitive situations. Probably don't really have to explain why that is. You should pretty much understand that it is just a software program. It is just a machine learning algorithm. So if you're talking about sensitive situations, ChatGPT isn't going to be able to help. And again, it's always just dependent on the data it's been trained on. So it's not going to know anything about a specific individual or a specific person and their circumstances. So it's just basically picking up patterns in data and responding based on these patterns it's identified. So what should you take away from this section? Use ChatGPT for what it's good at. It's good at writing content, it's good at summarizing responses, and it's good at researching topics and finding information. The key is you need to prompt it properly. You need to provide it tons and tons of context, you need to provide it all the background information it needs, and you need to tell it how to structure its answer. And we're going to cover all this when we talk about how to prompt ChatGPT effectively. And the final thing is always verify and check what it's telling you. ChatGPT can be wrong, it can go off context, and it can provide lots of meaningless information. So make sure you always verify what it's telling you. Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about is prompting. So how to prompt effectively with ChatGPT. Prompting is just the way we interact with ChatGPT. So a prompt is the text input we provide ChatGPT. It's as simple as that. And so the reason we need to understand prompting is because the better we prompt ChatGPT, the better the answer we're going to get from it. The better we're going to get a response that serves our needs and purpose. As an example, we've prompted ChatGPT and we've asked it, what is construction project management? As a response to this prompt, ChatGPT has told us construction project management involves overseeing the planning, design, and construction of a project, and on and on and on. So we've given it a prompt, it's given us a response. With ChatGPT, this whole discipline of prompt engineering has emerged. What's prompt engineering? It's basically working out how to prompt ChatGPT better to get better responses. Effectively, if you want to get the best out of ChatGPT, you need to know how to ask it the right questions. Let's start by looking at an example of a bad prompt. As an example, we've asked ChatGPT, how should I deliver a project? It's given us a long generic response, which might be fine depending on what we need it for, but I bet the person asking this question wants a tailored response to their project. So basically, if we don't give ChatGPT context, we don't tell it the type of answer we want, we're just going to get generic answers that aren't tailored to our needs. Let's now look at an example of a good prompt. I'm the project manager on a $5 million road construction project in the east of Melbourne, Australia. The project will take place in winter. I have never delivered a project this big. I'm working for the general contractor engaged by the project developer. The project has just started the design phase and we've not started on-site works. Act as a mentor or experienced project manager, and I want 10 short, simple, actionable dot points that I can use to perform well. In this situation, we've given ChatGPT a lot more context. We've told it who we are, what we're trying to do, who we want ChatGPT to be, and the format we want the response. Basically, we're looking for mentorship and guidance to help plan and deliver a project, and we've given it specifics of the project we want to apply this to. We can break down what makes a good prompt. And the framework I want you to think about as we're going through this is, don't imagine you're talking to ChatGPT. Imagine you're talking to the exact person you'd want to provide the answer. In that situation, what information would you need to provide them? How would you need to frame the question? What context do you need to provide them? Effectively, that's all prompt engineering it is. We're taking a framework for how to ask a question, but really this same question could be asked to an experienced individual. So what makes a good prompt? We need a task, so we need to tell ChatGPT what we want them to do. We need a context, we need to provide a background information. We should give it an example of the format and type of response we want. We want to give it a persona, so we want to tell it to take on a specific role. We want to choose the format of the response, and then if we need it, we can choose the tone of the response. Now we're going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail to break down what makes a really good prompt. The first is the task. When we're talking about a task, we're really talking about an action verb. So we're going to tell it to do something. So generate, summarize, write, prepare, review, analyze. That's what we mean by an action verb. It's a specific action verb that we're telling ChatGPT to perform a task. We can have multiple tasks in a prompt or a single task. So as an example, prepare a list of activities involved in the construction of an in-ground concrete pier for a light pole foundation, or identify a list of possible risks associated with this task. There are action verbs, and these are instructing ChatGPT what we want it to do. The task is the most important part of a prompt, so you can't get an answer unless you give ChatGPT a task. The next thing we need to provide is ChatGPT context. So the way to think about this is, what background information would an uninformed person need to know about the task to complete it effectively? Now remember, we don't necessarily have to have the entire context in the prompt. Remember, when we open a new chat in ChatGPT, ChatGPT remembers all the previous things we've told it in that chat. So we've already given it the project specifics. We don't necessarily need to repeat it, but the context overall, whether it's in the specific prompt or in the chat, should cover everything an uninformed person needs to know to complete the task we're asking of it. As an example, let's look at this one. So I'm conducting a risk management workshop at the start of a project. The project is to construct a new gas power station, and we're taking on the role of the EPC. The project is located in a remote area of Australia. We have worked with the client before and have a good relationship. What are the key risks for the project? So the task is to identify the key risk, and the context is the background on that we're working on a power station. It's in a remote area of Australia, and we've worked with the client before. The next thing we can do to help ChatGPT improve the quality of the response is to give it examples. Now, there's been research done on large language models like ChatGPT, and they've proven that if you can give ChatGPT an example of the format or type of response you're looking for, it'll drastically improve the performance. As an example, here is an example of one of the risks. The plant fails during operation, and as the EPC, we've taken on the performance risk and get hit with damages. So we've given it the type of examples we would want when it's preparing this list of risks. When we've given a task, a context, and an example, the next thing we should do to improve the quality of the response is to give it a persona to take on. What I mean by this is, if you could have access to the perfect person to respond to this question, who would it be? Then we ask ChatGPT to take on the role of that person. So who would you want ChatGPT? Who would be the perfect person who could help with the task? As an example, when preparing the risk register, act as a company chief risk officer, or provide advice as an experienced project manager who has dealt with similar projects. So that's the persona we're asking ChatGPT to take on. The next thing we need to give ChatGPT is a format for how we want the response. This might not be super important. Say you just want general advice or text, then ChatGPT will generate a text-based response. But if there's a specific format we want the answer in, then we should ask ChatGPT to do that, because it'll make it much easier with us taking and using the information. For example, prepare a project schedule for the construction of a new road. For the format, I want the result in a table with task number, activity name, activity start date, activity end date, and activity precursor. And as you can see, it's output this information in the table. That's super useful, because we could take this and copy it into Microsoft Project, and we've got a Gantt chart. So ChatGPT might not be able to create the Gantt chart, but we can get the information in a format where we can quickly extract it and put it directly into Microsoft Project. So that's why specifying the format we want the response is so important. Then finally, we can also choose a tone. Now, depending on the type of prompt you're doing, you might not need to specify a tone. However, if you're doing something like writing an email, preparing communication for a team, then tone becomes increasingly important. So we can tell ChatGPT, use a casual tone, use a formal tone, use a sophisticated tone. So these are the things we can tell ChatGPT, and then the text response it gives us will take on this tone. Now let's pull all of this together and go through an example prompt. So you are a senior project planner tasked with preparing the detailed construction project schedule for a new road project. The project involves constructing two 5-kilometer road lanes, including guardrails, street lighting, and line marking. The project is planned to start on the 1st of August 2024. Prepare a construction project schedule that is output as a table with activity number, activity name, start date, end date, and activity precursor. The schedule should involve around 30 activities. The level of detail I would like includes mobilizing to site, excavation broken into 1-kilometer sections with lags between activities, and concrete foundations for lighting. So that's an example prompt that ties all of this together. Let's now break this down and look at the specific components. So the first is the task. We've asked ChatGPT, prepare a construction project schedule that is output as a table. So that's the task, to prepare a construction project schedule. The next thing is the context. So the project involves constructing two 5-kilometer road lanes, including guardrails, street lighting, and line marking. The project is planned to start on the 1st of August 2024. Next, we've given it examples. So the level of detail I would like includes mobilizing to site, excavation, and 1-kilometer chunks. So that's an example of what type of activities we wanted to include in the schedule. Now, we could have given it a complete schedule from another project as the example, or we could just tell it examples of the type of activities. There's lots of different ways we can format our examples. Next, we've got a persona. So we've asked ChatGPT to take on the role of a senior project planner. And that's the type of person in the real world we would want to be able to help us with this task. We've also specified the format we want the response. We've asked it to output as a table with activity number, activity start date, and activity name. And that's important because it helps us to reuse this information. We could then just take this and copy and paste it into Microsoft Project or another scheduling software. And then what's the response we've gotten? We've got a construction project schedule. It's broken down to around 30 activities. Excavation is broken down into chunks. You can see from the start and finish dates that it's factored in lags between these activities. It's pretty much done exactly what we've told it because we gave it a lot of information, context, and direction in the prompts. In summary, prompting is so important because the level of detail, the level of direction you put into your prompt is going to be directly proportionate to the quality of the output that you get from ChatGPT. Okay, so now we understand how we can prompt ChatGPT and how we can give it direction to complete tasks. We're going to start looking at all the different things we can ask ChatGPT to do. First one we're going to look at is content creation. How can we use ChatGPT to write things like reports, articles, newsletters, project management plans, inspection and test plans, things like this? We're going to look at how ChatGPT can be used to write documents. To use ChatGPT effectively to create content, we want to follow 4 simple steps. The first one is we want to generate an idea. So we want to create an idea for a piece of content we need to write. Second thing we want to do is we want to outline that piece of content. So we want to break it down into dot points or a structure and agree on the content that's going to go into it. The third thing is we then want to write the article. We actually want to produce the piece of text, the document, the report. And finally, we want to review and edit it and improve it to make it match exactly what we need. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to use ChatGPT to help us work out what we need to write. As an example, imagine we're a construction manager working on a new shopping center and we want some way of informing the existing shop owners of what's happening, what's going on, and we've asked ChatGPT what's the best form of document we could use to prepare this. Then, once we've settled on the type of document we want to create, the first thing we want to use ChatGPT to do is to help us develop the outline. That basically means we're going to use ChatGPT to create a list of dot points that covers the content we want to write. And this will be like our brainstorming, like fleshing out the idea and working out what sort of information we need to include, and then we can refine this outline with ChatGPT before we start the actual writing process. For our shopping center example, we've decided we're going to provide store owners with a comprehensive project overview in a written format. So then we've asked ChatGPT to expand on this outline. We've told it what we're going to write, and then we've asked it to help summarize in dot points what content should go into this article. Then we can go back and forward with ChatGPT if we think it's missed things, if we think it should include extra information, or if it's got information we want it to take out. We can go back and forward with ChatGPT to then refine this outline. Then, once this outline's been written, it's as simple as then just asking ChatGPT to write the article, write the piece of content. After refining the outline, we've then simply asked ChatGPT, can you please write this document? And it's gone ahead and produced a document that covers the comprehensive project overview that we can give to store owners. So it's got an introduction, goes through the project scope, goes through the project timeline, and basically it's covering all the key information that the store owners need to know about the project so that they can sit down and go through it and understand the impacts on them. So this is an example of using ChatGPT to create content that could help manage stakeholders, for example. But you could apply the same process to writing an inspection and test plan, writing a construction management plan, or writing a quality management plan. It's really the same process. Once the piece of content's written, we should then edit it. So we want to read through it. We want to pick up any errors. We want to pick up any oversights, anything you don't like about it. Maybe you don't like the tone. Maybe you feel like it's missing content. These sorts of things we can then tell ChatGPT and get it to rewrite it multiple times until the piece of content aligns with what we're looking for. As an example, when we reviewed the document, we felt like it was missing the benefits to existing store owners, and we've asked ChatGPT to rewrite the document, expanding on these benefits to help persuade and encourage stakeholders to support our project. And so that process, as I've said, you can follow to create your own content tailored to your own needs. ChatGPT is a fantastic writing tool, and that's why it's used a lot in industries like marketing to write articles, blog posts, email marketing newsletters, and these sorts of things. So it's used a lot in that industry. However, it's also a fantastic summarizing tool. In this section, we're going to take you through a process you can use to effectively summarize information with ChatGPT and save yourself a ton of time. One of my favorite uses for ChatGPT is to summarize information. As construction managers, we get exposed to so much documentation. Think construction management plans, client specifications, international standards, design documents, design reports. A lot of the time we have to take in so much information and use it to make informed decisions. That's why the summarizing function of ChatGPT is incredibly useful, and it can save you a ton of time. The basic process that I use for summarizing information is to first input the information, then set objectives. So then we tell ChatGPT what we want it to do with the information. We then get it to generate a summary, and then we can review this summary and ask it further questions. With the release of ChatGPT 4.0, it's expanded on the different ways we can upload information to ChatGPT. So as it stands, we can input ChatGPT information in a variety of different formats. So these include text files, data files, image files, audio files, PowerPoints, and documents. So things like PDFs or Word docs. As an example, imagine we're working in the pre-contracts phase of a project and we've been sent a tender document from a client. This is for a project to upgrade a new section of road. Now, it's a long document, it's like 70 pages. There's only a specific set of information we want from it. What could we do? We could upload it to ChatGPT and then ask it to summarize this information and put it into a format for which we need it. So the first thing we do is we simply upload the PDF to ChatGPT. The next thing we need to do is we need to set objectives for ChatGPT. So we want to tell it what to do with this information. So we could ask it, what are the key statistics? Summarize the main points into short sentences, or list the key steps in the process. So basically we're telling us from the information we've provided ChatGPT, what do we want it to do with it? For this example of a construction tender, we're going to ask ChatGPT to summarize the key bits of information, to extract the tender start and finish dates, basically these sorts of things. So it's going to save us going through the 70-page document to extract these bits of information. We're just going to tell ChatGPT we're working for the general contractor, planning on tendering this, and we want it to act as basically the tender coordinator and go through the document and extract the key details like start and finish dates and so on and so forth. So we'll put all that into a prompt where we set instructions for ChatGPT. Once we've given ChatGPT the direction, all we need to do is then get it to generate the summary. So looking at the summary, ChatGPT has provided us for a prompt. We can see it's covering the project overview, what documentation's been provided, the key dates for the tender, the key contact information, the evaluation criteria, the scope of works, and the contract terms. Once we've generated our summary, the next thing we can do is review it. We can actually ask ChatGPT further questions about the data we've provided it. So we could ask it more information about the tender, or if we uploaded a project schedule, rather than having to go through hundreds and hundreds of lines of a schedule, we could just ask it for specific key bits of information like what date does the earthwork start, or what date does the concreting start. Basically, it's going to save us time going through documents, and it's just a quick way to extract key information. So even if we didn't originally ask these requests, when we set the objectives for how it's going to summarize the information, we can still prompt it further to extract any of the information we think's missing. As an example, going back to our construction tender, we're going to further prompt ChatGPT to elaborate on the specific construction scope. So we want to know more information about the scope of works that's being requested as part of this tender, and ChatGPT is going to come back to us with further information from the document. So basically, it's just saving us time reading, reviewing documents, trying to find the information for ourselves. It just makes the whole process much easier and much faster. What are some uses of this function for construction managers? Well, the first one is just getting through the mountain of different project documentation. There's usually hundreds and hundreds of documents for any major construction project. You often only need to know very niche and specific things. So just going to save you time trawling through all the documentation. Next one is with quality control and design management is finding standards and specifications can be challenging, and you can research these with ChatGPT. The next one is actually meeting minutes. So since you can upload an audio file to ChatGPT, imagine this, you record a meeting on Zoom, extract the audio, upload the audio to ChatGPT and ask it, based on this audio file, please write a set of meeting minutes. That's potentially saved you a ton of time. Then you can also use it for learning and development. Say you've got a new person starting on your project team, you can get it to summarize the key bits of information into an email and send it to them. And automatically you've provided them the key project context. Then finally, you could use it for stakeholder engagement. So you can summarize information relevant to certain stakeholders and send it out to them. Really, there's a ton of different applications that the summarizing function has. In the same way we can use ChatGPT to summarize and interpret text, we can use ChatGPT to summarize and interpret data. In this section, we're going to explore the data analysis function of ChatGPT. Now, this function is changing rapidly. Every couple of months, or probably quicker now, ChatGPT is releasing new revisions and getting better and better at the data analysis function. ChatGPT can provide guidance and structure on how to analyze data. As construction project managers, we're exposed to lots of different pieces of data, like weather reports, productivity tracking, all sorts of different bits of information. Now, we can get ChatGPT to help us analyze these in the correct way. The first thing we can do with ChatGPT is to simply provide us guidance on how to analyze and deal with data. So we can ask ChatGPT questions like, what's a linear regression model? And ChatGPT will explain it to us and the process to follow. So we don't necessarily need to use the data analysis function in ChatGPT at all. we can simply get it to explain us these core concepts. As an example of using guidance from ChatGPT, we've prompted it. So I'm working as a construction project engineer and I need to explain why there's a cost increase this month. And ChatGPT has just given us a range of options we can follow and processes to work through to explain this. The next thing we can use ChatGPT for is if we're performing the data analysis in another piece of software, like Microsoft Excel, like R, or another statistics package, then we can actually get ChatGPT to help us use the piece of software. For example, in Excel, say we need to write a formula, ChatGPT can give us a formula for what specifically we want to do. So for example, the other day, I was trying to convert a set of data from weekly to monthly, and I wanted a formula to do so, and ChatGPT gave me a formula I could simply copy into Excel. As an example, we prompted ChatGPT and told it we've got a set of weekly expenditures we want to easily convert into monthly data, and ChatGPT has given us some options for how to do this in Microsoft Excel. So we could use a pivot table, we could use a formula, we just get a couple of different options. So far we've looked at how ChatGPT can help us to understand data analysis concepts and how we can use ChatGPT to help us use other bits of software. Now we can look at how ChatGPT can directly perform data analysis. So this is where we upload data into ChatGPT and it performs the analysis for us. As an example, I've got a set of data in Excel, which is week by week expenditure, which gives us our actual cost, our planned value, and our earned value. And we're going to get ChatGPT to do an earned value management calculation for us. So we've uploaded the ChatGPT the data, and we've asked it to calculate cost performance index and schedule performance index. And it's uploaded, interpreted the data, and given us a table against each month what our CPI is and our SPI is. Then it's actually plotted it on a chart. So we can see over time how cost performance index is trending and how our schedule performance index is trending. And that only took a matter of seconds. Getting the data, uploading it to ChatGPT, and telling us what we wanted to do with it. The next thing we can use ChatGPT to help us with is the actual data collection process. So this is where we create a survey or a template that we send out to people and get them to provide us information. As an example, say you're working as a project risk manager and you want to collect information from all the different stakeholders on what their top 5 risks are. And we've told ChatGPT this and we've got it to create a survey that we can send out and get consolidated feedback. The next thing I want to look at are custom GPTs. So I spoke about in the introduction custom GPTs, and these are ever evolving. Every day people are creating, training and releasing new custom GPTs for specific problems like data analysis. In this example, there's a custom GPT created specifically for data analysis, and it allows us to upload a data set, explore and understand the data, clean the data, perform exploratory data analysis, and then finally use it for predictive modeling. As an example, for our road construction project, I've got a whole lot of historical weather data going back to the 1970s, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to upload it to ChatGPT and get it to turn this into average monthly rainfall data, which we could then use to plan our project. So if we know there's going to be more wet weather in certain months, we could then use this information when we're allowing for different amounts of inclement weather in the schedule. So ChatGPT has completed this entire data analysis process for us using the custom GPT. The applications we've been looking at for ChatGPT so far have been pretty straightforward. They've been more about analyzing data, summarizing information, or creating content based on an agreed structure. This section is going to be slightly different. We're going to show how we can use ChatGPT to actually help us think. Brainstorming is the process of generating ideas, and this is actually an incredibly useful application of ChatGPT. A lot of the time as construction managers, we have to think about what might go wrong in the future, what risks might eventuate, or even generating a list of all the tasks required in a process. We go through this brainstorming process, and ChatGPT is incredibly good at helping us generate these supersets. The way I like to think about ChatGPT brainstorming is generating a superset of ideas. So say we have a problem, say we're trying to identify risks, say we're trying to identify all the tasks required to complete the project. That brainstorming process of coming up with the original list is basically just trying to generate a superset of ideas. And that's how ChatGPT can help. It can help us create these initial lists of tasks, risks, dependencies, these sorts of things. As an example for our project, I've asked ChatGPT, can you please generate a superset of all the possible risks on the project? And it's gone ahead and done that. It's got technical risk, it's got cost risk, it's got schedule risk. And then as simple as that, we've generated our initial list of risks. And I always find as a construction manager, that's one of the hardest things, coming up with that initial superset of risks, ideas, tasks, a work breakdown structure. So ChatGPT is really, really good at generating these initial lists. A more specific application of this comes to problem solving. So say something's gone wrong. ChatGPT can help us come up with a whole range of options for what to do about it. Now, how effectively this works is going to depend on how much context we give ChatGPT. The more context we can give it around the problem, exactly what went wrong, what the implications are, and so on and so forth, better the response it's going to give us. And it can also help us when we're investigating the root cause of a problem so we can better address it and improve our processes going forward. As an example, we've told ChatGPT that we ran into a problem on a project where we didn't have an excavation permit ready in time for a contractor and it delayed the start of the earthworks. And then ChatGPT, we've asked to do a root cause analysis, and it's gone through in detail and done a 5 whys analysis, determined the root cause, and it's also given us instructions on how to do that. So this is where we use ChatGPT as a root cause analysis to identify the core problem we need to address. We all know that construction projects are messy and complicated. Think about what's involved in building a building. There's earthworks, there's concrete, there's foundations, there's steel structures, there's glazing, there's fit out, there's mechanical, there's electrical. There's so many different technical concepts we need to understand. Couple that with all the different domains of construction project management, quality control, scheduling, understanding the critical path, understanding the components of a budget. As construction managers, there's just so many different bits of information we need to understand, and we need to be all over to effectively implement the project. And that's why the single biggest use I find for ChatGPT is to help me understand different concepts. In this section, I want to talk about how you can use ChatGPT to learn, but also how you can use ChatGPT to teach others. For construction managers, there's 3 separate use cases of education with ChatGPT. So we can learn about project management concepts. This is where we learn about things like schedules, budgets, or quality control. We can learn about technical content. So this is where we need to understand electrical engineering, civil engineering, mechanical systems. So we need to understand these sorts of specifics. The final thing we can use education for is understanding the project context. So actually learning about the specific project that we're working on. So when we talk about mastering project management concepts, I like to break these down into 2 separate buckets. There's the things we know we don't know, and there's the things we don't know we don't know. So if something we know we don't know is, for example, we're talking about a construction project schedule and we don't know what the term the critical path means, we can simply ask ChatGPT, what is the critical path? It's a classic example of something we know, we don't know. The other set of concepts are things we don't know we don't know. So say something's going wrong in our project and we need to come up with a way to address it. Say we don't know how much we're spending, or say how we don't know how we keep falling behind schedule and what to do about it. Then ChatGPT can suggest corrective actions and help us indirectly learn these new concepts, like how to manage a schedule better. As an example, I've simply asked ChatGPT, what is the project critical path? And ChatGPT has explained to us what the term the critical path means. So it's the longest sequence of activities through the project, and it's shown us how we can work to identify our project critical path. Then, as an example of something we don't know, we've told ChatGPT we're simply struggling to maintain the schedule. And then it's given us a list of suggestions we can implement, like optimizing resource usage, or improving communication efficiency. So it's indirectly teaching us how to manage a project better based on the problem or the challenge that we're facing. The other great use of ChatGPT is to master technical concepts. So say, for example, we're working on an earthworks project and someone tells us we need to do a compaction test. Well, What is a compaction test? We can use ChatGPT to quickly research these topics. Or if we're working on a renewable energy project and it's a wind farm and we want to understand how wind turbines work, we can just quickly ask ChatGPT. I find going through ChatGPT is much faster and you get much better results than going through Google and having to go into a whole lot of websites to find the bit of information you're looking for. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT, how does a wind turbine work? Write a detailed response for somebody with no technical understanding. I always think it's really important that you tell it you're not a technical person or you want a non-technical answer, because the level of detail it'll give you in the answer will match your understanding. And that's really, really important to help accelerate understanding these concepts. The third education use for ChatGPT is where we need to learn about or teach others about the project context. So this is where we're learning about things specific to our project. And I find this is one of the biggest challenges with onboarding people onto new projects, but also starting new projects. So say you're going and working on a new project, there's just so much context and background information you need to quickly come up to speed with. So that's why you can use ChatGPT to understand the context of the project you're working on, or even turn this into a presentation that you can show others to quickly onboard them. So for the Greenway expansion project, we've asked ChatGPT, what is the critical information the project planner needs to know about the project, and turn this into a summary. And then we can just send this to them and they're quickly caught up with the context they need to know and educated themselves about the most important things they need to know about the project. So it's such an effective way of teaching other people the critical information they need to know. You could teach them about technical information, you could teach them about project management information, or you could help them get up to speed on your project. And that brings us to the end of our exploration of different generic applications of ChatGPT. So we covered things like creating content, education, brainstorming or summarizing, and data analysis. And so these are generic applications. Then we're going to move on to looking at how we can take these generic applications and apply them to specific domains of construction project management. All right, well, let's get started talking about all the different ways we can apply ChatGPT to construction management. The first one we're going to look at is project scope management. So how we can use ChatGPT to manage, validate, and control the work we're doing. Scope management is defining and controlling what is included and excluded from the project. Now, that is so critical on construction projects because everyone's different, they're messy and complicated, they involve a range of different disciplines. So controlling and managing our project scope is one of the core things we're going to do as a construction manager. We can break project scope down into 3 different parts. So the first is the deliverables or the product we're creating. So if we're talking about building a bridge, when we talk about the deliverables, we're talking about the physical bridge itself. That's what we're constructing. It's the finished product we're trying to build. We can also look at any temporary work. So what is the work we have to do to achieve this end result? So it's different to something that's going to be handed over, but it's still work that's necessary to finish the project. For example, we'll probably need to set up temporary site offices. We might have to build a laydown for storing materials, or we might have to build an access road to site. Now, these will all be pulled out at the end of the job, so they're classified as temporary works and don't form a part of the finished product. But then another component of project scope that's often not considered are the risks we're responsible for. Now, why is that important? Because when we transfer scope from one party to another through a construction contract, we're also transferring risk. Different parties are responsible for different risks. So as you can see, project scope starts to get a lot more complicated than you may have originally thought. So why does project scope management matter so much? Well, scope is what we're going to be doing. It's the work we need to do to complete the project and also the risks we're responsible for. Why is scope so critical? Because the work we're doing, it drives our schedule, so how long the project's going to take. It drives our cost, so how much the project's going to cost to deliver. And then it also defines all of the different contractual relationships. So the scope we're completing in the project is defined if we're the general contractor in the contract we have with our client, but it's also defined in all the contracts we have with our subcontractors. So say we're getting in a concreting contractor to build our bridge, we need to clearly define exactly what we want them to do for us. So why is scope important? Because it's messy, it's complicated, it drives our schedule, it drives our budgets, and it's defined in contracts. Ultimately, on construction projects, scope is hard to define, it's subjective, it's messy, it's complicated, and it's always more complicated than we originally thought when we were planning the project. And importantly, scope always has commercial implications. The scope we need to do for the project is always defined in the contract. So how can ChatGPT help us with construction project scope management? Well, there's a couple of different ways. The first is by helping us to clearly define project scope. So we can use it to create things like a work breakdown structure, scope definitions. Overall, we can use it to help us define the project scope in extensive detail. Second is it can help us to put in place processes to help verify and validate project scopes being completed correctly. For example, we could create a checklist to verify a certain part of the work's been done correctly. So it can be used to help us verify project scope. It can also be used to help us control project scope. So to make sure that we're sticking inside the boundaries of the scope as defined in the contract. And then finally, it can help us to manage risk. So that element of uncertainty that forms part of project scope can help us to manage, foresee, and plan for risks. The first use case we're going to look at is defining project scope. So how can ChatGPT help us to clearly define project scope? Well, it can help us to create a work breakdown structure. It can help us to expand and define on existing scope documents like project specifications. And overall, it can help us think through everything that needs to be done to complete the project and review existing project documentation to clearly define and extend on that definition of what exactly we are going to be doing in the project. As a really simple example, I've given ChatGPT an extensive prompt where I've told it we're the general contractor working on the project, and I've asked it to create a work breakdown structure, and it's gone ahead and done this. It's created a massive work breakdown structure based on its understanding of the project scope and the deliverables we need to complete the project. So when I was prompting ChatGPT, I was careful to clarify that I wanted it to focus on the direct activities, the activities we need to complete the project. So we used the brainstorming function of ChatGPT to help us define project scope in detail by creating work breakdown structure. Once we have begun delivering the project, we can use ChatGPT to help us verify project scope. So this means creating documentation, checklists, and helping us put in place processes to check that we're actually delivering the project scope as required. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT to create a scope validation checklist that we can use to check that the street lighting works have been completed correctly. And it's basically created us a big checklist we can go through to verify and validate this portion of the project scope has been completed correctly. A massive problem on projects, particularly where scope isn't clearly defined to begin with, is controlling project scope. What that means is making sure that we only do the project scope as we originally set it out at the start of the project. So we can use ChatGPT to control project scope. What that means is to avoid scope creep, to check that the work we're doing is in line with the project scope. The way we're going to do that is we're going to train ChatGPT, so give it context on the specific documentation of our project, the documentation that defines project scope. Then we'll be able to ask it questions to validate if specific activities are in fact part of the project scope. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT and told it that our client has asked us to install a new electronic billboard. And I've asked ChatGPT, can you draft and write an email to the client explaining whether this is or is not in project scope? And ChatGPT's responded and created an email that we can then send our client to explain it's not in project scope, the project scope's clearly defined as these activities, and that what we need to do to implement this change. So what that would mean in practice is basically we're telling them, or ChatGPT is telling our client, that to do this work, we're going to charge a variation. The next thing we can use ChatGPT for is risk management. And I'm not going to touch on that too much, but as we were talking about earlier, risk forms an important part of project scope. Not just the work we're doing, but also what risks and what uncertainty that we're responsible for. ChatGPT plays an important role, particularly in identifying risks and coming up with action plans. So we'll look at this in a later section. We talk about how ChatGPT can be used for project risk management. What are the biggest challenges to construction project scope management, and how can ChatGPT help? Well, the first one that I often see is the project scope isn't clearly defined to begin with because it's messy and complicated. As we've seen, using the brainstorming function of ChatGPT and its ability to summarize, read, and interpret project documents like project specifications, we can go to extensive detail to define exactly what we're going to be doing in the project. So we can get rid of the mystery in defining project scope and add clarity by creating a work breakdown structure, by creating a project scope statement, and overall defining the project scope in detail. The next thing we can use is we can train ChatGPT, so give it context on these project scope documents, so we can use it then to validate and avoid scope creep. We can check what is or isn't in project scope based on its understanding. Final thing is it can help us to deal with change. What often happens on construction projects is things change, and these changes just get absorbed into the project and cause increased cost and schedule delays. ChatGPT can help us to control and manage project scope by making us follow and implementing a proper project change management process. Design management is directly tied to project scope management. The development of the design is the development of the project specifications, drawings, and standards that define what we're going to be building. So they basically define what the scope is. They define the finished product. As projects get increasingly complicated with more trades, more different technologies, we're seeing design management becoming an increasingly important part of construction management. That's why in this section, we're going to look at how ChatGPT can be used to manage the project design. Let's start by defining design management. So design management is the development of the project technical solution and management during the construction phase. There's two critical elements of design management. There's the development phase. So this is when we create the drawings and specifications that define what to build. And then there's the construction phase. So this is when we actually go and build what's defined in the drawings. We need design management processes to manage changes to the design, and then to close out the design and create the as-built drawings. How can ChatGPT be used to help us manage the project design? The first thing, it can help us to understand requirements. It can help us to formulate a design strategy. It can help us to prepare standards and specifications. It can help us to write and prepare RFIs if there's design changes during the construction phase. It can help us to manage change. And finally, it can help with the final handover to the client. One of the key elements of design management is understanding requirements. So as part of the design management process, we need to understand the underlying project requirements that are going to feed into our design. If we're building a building, does it have to have 5 floors or does it have to have 10 floors? Does it need elevators or are stairs sufficient? Does it need a fire protection system? Does it need emergency lighting? Does it need extra ventilation? All of these factors feed into the design, and they come from a broad range of areas. There's project-specific requirements. So if you use the example for a building, whether it's got 5 floors or 10 floors, that'll be a project-specific requirements. But then there's also relevant standards and specifications. So for example, in Australia, buildings of a certain size will need a dry fire or a fire protection system. That's a general standard. And there's also drawings. There might be typical drawings, there might be council drawings, or there might be original concept design drawings we have to follow. We can give all these standards and specifications to ChatGPT, and it can help us to clarify and understand the requirements, which will inform design decisions. As an example, for the street lighting works on our road project, I've asked ChatGPT what is the Australian standard for the allowable voltage drop of an electrical circuit. And it's gone ahead and said we're allowed a 5% voltage drop, which equates to 11.5 volts. So that's the voltage drop we're allowed for our distribution board to the final circuit. And ChatGPT has gone and read the specifications and given us an answer to this. ChatGPT can also help us to formulate design strategies. So this is where we need to come up with a way of developing the design to meet all the project requirements in the most cost-effective and best for project way. Maybe our project has a really tight timeline and we want to factor that into the design solution. So we need to factor in procuring long lead materials and choosing materials that will help reduce the overall project schedule. Now that's just an example, but these are the sorts of requirements we need to factor in and then produce a strategy that helps us to comply with these requirements. ChatGPT can help us to understand different options, do cost-benefit analysis, look at different feasible solutions, and come up with the optimal solution for our project. And to do that, we're using the brainstorming function of ChatGPT. As an example, we've asked ChatGPT, what is the optimal design strategy for the electrical design? Should we have one distribution board or should we have multiple distribution boards? And ChatGPT's run us through the different options and the implications of these options. So we have to consider the circuit length and voltage drop. So if we're running a longer distance, we'll need bigger cables. But if we're putting in more distribution board, you add additional capital costs of procuring the distribution boards. So ChatGPT has taken us through the pros and cons of each options and what they might mean for our project. While ChatGPT doesn't have the capacity to produce drawings yet and formulate extensive design solutions, it can help us with the writing portion of the design. So while we'll be creating drawings, we often also need to come up with standards and specifications. So ChatGPT can help us to prepare and write specifications and provide an outline of all the design requirements and integrate these into a document. As an example, ChatGPT has written us a project specification for the concrete works on the project. So it's referring to the relevant Australian standards. It's defining what materials we can use. It's talking about the level of aggregate we're allowed, provides detail for concrete mix designs, provides detail for formwork and reinforcement, and the applicable Australian standards that apply to that, requirements around placing and compaction, requirements around curing and protection, and requirements around testing. Now, ChatGPT has written all that off a single prompt and its understanding of the project context. Once we've developed the design, ChatGPT can also be used during the construction phase. So once the drawings and specifications have been created, ChatGPT can help us during the construction phase when we run into issues with the design and we have to request for changes. It can help us to write and prepare RFIs, but it can also help to read and review the project design documentation to see if answers to our questions already exist in there. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT to prepare an RFI for a situation we ran into during construction where we had a clash between a light pole foundation and an existing utility. It's gone ahead and created an RFI for the design team. It's described the issue and it's described what actions we would like them to take. It's even given us some direction on what attachments we should provide the RFI to get the best possible answer. As an extension to what I was talking about in project scope management and the RFI process, ChatGPT can also be used to help us manage project change. It can help us understand the impact of changes on the design solution and also to deal with non-conformances. So non-conformances are where we run into an issue on site and for whatever reason, we're unable to construct something as per the drawings. So ChatGPT can help us with the non-conformance process. As an example, I've told ChatGPT that we installed one of the light pole foundations in the wrong location. Can you please create a non-conformance report? And it's gone ahead and written a full non-conformance report summarizing the issue we had and what corrective actions we're proposing to do about it. Then at the completion of the project, a big part of a design manager's role is compiling the as-built drawings and facilitating with the handover of the finished construction works to the client. So ChatGPT can help prepare all of this documentation. We could use it to create an RFI register that gets accompanied with the as-built drawings explaining the changes from the issue for construction stage to the as-built stage. We could use it to summarize any further changes to the design. Then we could also use it to create something like a handover training presentation that explains what we've built and provide training for the O&M team that's inheriting the asset. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT, can you please create a training presentation explaining what we've built for the operations and maintenance team inheriting the finished construction project? It's gone ahead and created a detailed training presentation that we could deliver to support our completions and handover process. So what are the biggest challenges to design management and how can ChatGPT help? Well, firstly, ChatGPT can help us to understand complex requirements. As projects get more complicated, more standards and specifications apply, there's more rules we need to follow. ChatGPT can help us to wade through all this information, always extract the relevant information to us so we can make sure that we're making the correct design decision. Next, there's always an excess of information on projects. There's always tons of standards, specifications, and other requirements. And again, ChatGPT can be trained on all this information, provided all this context, and it can basically be a single source of truth we can go to find the information that's relevant to us rather than sifting through a ton of documents. The final thing is there's always issues during the construction phase with managing changes to the design. ChatGPT can help us to formulate the RFI process by making it easy to write and prepare RFIs and quickly preempt the impacts of the changes and what we should do about it. One of the first things we do in a project, and typically when we get our first cut of the drawings and specifications, is what we want to know is how much it's going to cost to build. That's why in this section, we're going to talk about how you can use ChatGPT for construction estimating. We're going to cover how you can use ChatGPT to help estimate construction costs. To begin with, we'll just quickly define estimating. So estimating is the process of accurately calculating the costs of building something. Why does estimating matter? Well, Project Management 101, and whenever we talk about feasibility studies, the central question we're always trying to answer is a project going to deliver more value than it costs? The only way we can work out how much a project's going to cost to deliver is to use estimating. We need to estimate the costs of completing the project. If we think a project is going to cost less than the value it generates, then it definitely makes sense to proceed with the project. If it's not going to deliver as much value as it's going to cost, then the project doesn't make sense to do. Estimating also matters for several other reasons on construction projects. The first one is it helps us understand different options. So say we're managing the design of a project and we have to decide between installing multiple distribution boards on the street lighting or installing one distribution board. The central question we're going to ask is which option is cheaper. If the single option is better, then we'll go with that. If the multiple distribution board option is cheaper, then we'll go with that. Again, the only way we can know the answer to that question is to estimate the cost. So estimating helps with assessing different options. The next one is construction projects always involve the transfer of risk and responsibility in fixed fee lump sum contracts. As a general contractor, we'll quote to a client to deliver works for a fixed fee. To do that effectively, we need to estimate the cost. We need to know how much we think it's going to cost us to deliver the project. And then finally, it helps inform investment decisions. So we look at the value delivered by a project compared to the cost. We estimate each of these. We can determine whether a project is going to make sense to invest in. Let's now look at the estimating process, and then we're going to step through how ChatGPT can help in each of these defined stages. First is defining scope. We've already looked at how ChatGPT helps us to elaborate and define the project scope. The next one is calculating our direct costs. So from the scope, we've defined the activities we need to complete the project and allocating costs and resources to each of these. The second one is calculating our overhead and indirect costs before finally applying our profit and markup. And we're going to look at how ChatGPT can help with each of these steps. We already looked at this in the project scope management section, but basically ChatGPT can be used to read and interpret project documentations, understand project specifications, then help us to elaborate and define scope by creating a work breakdown structure. In this example, I've asked ChatGPT again to create a work breakdown structure for our project, but I've specifically asked it to focus on the direct cost activity. So I wanted to exclude everything else that's not a specific direct cost activity, so a task we need to complete the project scope. It's gone ahead and created this work breakdown structure. Once we've defined all these activities and created our work breakdown structure, ChatGPT can then be used to calculate the direct costs. So to calculate the costs of each of these activities, we can use it to help us determine what resources are required. We can use it to help us determine what costs can be assigned to each of these resources. We could use it to help us estimate reasonable productivities. So say, for example, we want to know a production rate for someone installing formwork. Well, ChatGPT can help us to work this out. And then we could just use ChatGPT, feed it the information it needs, and then get it to do all the calculations based on this information. So I've told ChatGPT the road's 5 kilometers long, 3 meters wide, and the formation is 400 mils deep. Based on this information and assuming the project's taking place in Melbourne, Australia, which would be important for calculating rates, I've then just asked it to go and calculate the cost. It's determined the volume of works, it's determined what activities are required to estimate the excavation, and it's applied reasonable resource rates. So it's $15 a meter cubed for excavation, $30 for soil disposal. It's factored in transportation costs, and it's come up with a direct cost of $330,000. For this, it's used basic meter cubed rates, but we could then go to ChatGPT and tell it we want a first principles self-perform rate based on a crew of a labourer, an operator, and a truck driver. We could give it rates for these different activities, and overall we could tailor the estimate to exactly what we want. You can see the power of the calculation process in ChatGPT. In addition to calculating our direct costs, so the costs of completing the physical construction works, we can also use ChatGPT to calculate our indirect costs. So these are the costs of supervising and managing the works. So we could use ChatGPT to just calculate the indirect costs. We could use it to help determine appropriate supervision and management. For example, using the excavating example and looking at the project schedule, ChatGPT could help us determine how many project supervisors we need. And basically, we could use it to perform a range of different functions to help us work out the costs of supervising and managing the works. I've asked ChatGPT to make an overall estimate of total project direct costs and then put a markup on this to calculate indirect costs. So it's got the road construction activities, it's got the street lighting installation, it's got the guardrail installation, and it's gone and applied these direct costs to all of these different activities to help us determine total project costs. It's then applied a profit and markup to this, and it's helping us work out our indirect costs for the project based on these direct costs. Once we've calculated our direct costs and our indirect costs, we need to apply a markup. So ChatGPT can help us doing this by helping us identify and estimate risks. It can help us determine any contingency we need to hold. Then it could help us determine a reasonable profit margin to apply. So finally, I've just asked ChatGPT what's a reasonable markup to apply, and based on the direct and indirect costs, it's applied a markup to this, and we've calculated total project value. In my experience, biggest challenges to estimating and how ChatGPT can help with these is first identifying scope. I've already spoken about the value of project scope management, but in my experience, scope is always missed when people are estimating. So ChatGPT can help us methodically work through the project to identify scope. Second thing, can help us come up with accurate rates and productivity. So when we're missing information or we need to make assumptions like how much someone can trench in a day, or how many poles they could install in a shift, we can use ChatGPT to help us get that information. Then finally, it can help us with putting the entire estimate together and making sure we're applying reasonable indirects, overheads, profit, and markup. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can use ChatGPT to help you control costs during the execution of a construction project. In the same way, ChatGPT can help us to accurately estimate the costs of construction works. Once we move into the delivery phase of the project, we can use ChatGPT to help us track, monitor, and control costs and hopefully spend less than our estimated costs during project delivery. At its simplest, cost control is now delivering the works for less than our planned costs. So when we estimate costs, we create our budget, our planned costs. Now we have to then deliver the project scope for less than our budget. Probably don't need to go into much detail explaining why project cost control matters. Ultimately, for a project to be successful, the amount of value it creates has to be greater than the cost of delivering the project. If it costs more to deliver than the value that it creates, then the project has destroyed wealth. Ultimately, business profitability is going to come from engaging in projects where the value we create is less than the cost. So after we've estimated our planned costs, we've worked how much we think it'll cost to deliver the project. We now need to deliver the project for less than this cost. And to do that, we're going to use cost control. So I'm going to break down the cost management process using ChatGPT into 4 sections. Setting up our budget, so taking our estimate and transferring this into a budget. Contracts and how we use contracts to control costs. Planning our cost management functions, and then tracking costs during project delivery. Okay, so the first step in this process is transferring our estimate into a budget. Now, an estimate is what we think the project's going to cost. When we build up an estimate, we build it up in a way where it's easy to calculate. Now, this is different to the structure of a budget, which is tracking how we spend money. So when we're estimating costs, for example, if we want to work out what allowance to make for PPE, we might have some nominal allowance per hour worked. That's how we're going to estimate the cost of our personal protective equipment. When it comes to then delivering the project, we're not going to track the amount we spend on PPE per hour. It's just going to be a bucket of money we draw down through the execution of the project. So we need to then take all the money we've allocated to PPE and put it into a single cost code. The way we break down the estimate and turn it into a budget, we use cost codes. We want to understand what the baseline costs are for each of these costs and then allocate them to different team members in the project to manage. So the first step in this process is we're going to use ChatGPT to take our estimate, our bucket of money with which we've got to deliver the project, and we want to turn it into a series of cost codes we can use to track and control expenditure. Okay, as an example, I've asked ChatGPT, based on our work breakdown structure, can you turn this estimate into a budget? And ChatGPT has gone ahead and taken out the values in our estimate and it's allocated them against different cost codes. So we can see our entire estimate has been mapped out across all the different activities we need to complete the project. We've got our direct costs, our indirect costs, and also our profit and risk and markup. And so our entire budget's been mapped against these different items. So we know exactly how much we've got in all of the different buckets of money. The next way we can use ChatGPT to help with our construction cost control is through procurement and contracts. So a major part of the scope of any construction project, we're going to outsource the subcontractors and suppliers. We can use ChatGPT to help us enhance the procurement process to make it easier for us to get high quality subcontractors and suppliers at a low cost. ChatGPT is fantastic at writing scopes of works, proofreading scopes of works, checking for mistakes, checking for scope gaps. So if we train ChatGPT on the scope of our project, we upload the project specifications and we tell ChatGPT what we want to write a scope of works for concrete works. What are all the possible scope gaps? ChatGPT can help us to work through and identify all the gaps of the package so we don't end up with costly variations through the construction phase. As an example, on our project, I've said we need to hire a subcontractor for the traffic management works. Here's some details. Based on the scope we trained it on, we've asked it to write and prepare a scope of works for us, and ChatGPT's gone ahead and done that. They've defined the scope of works, they did traffic management planning, traffic control, and so on and so forth. And we can ask ChatGPT what are some likely scope gaps, what are some things we wouldn't have thought out, and we can use ChatGPT as a brainstorming tool, one, to actually write the scope of works, but then to double check there's no gaps, which is always going to be the problem when procuring packages of works. Okay, so we've used ChatGPT to map our estimate and turn it into a budget. We've used it to help us with procurement and finding high quality subcontractors. The next thing we can use ChatGPT to do, which is going to help us save money during the construction phase, is to help us plan and prepare for the works. Now, the better we plan, the more we prepare, the more different things we think through, the more contingency plans we come up with for when things go wrong. Ultimately, we're going to save ourselves money. So ChatGPT, I find, works very well at pool planning. So pool planning is the concept of, if we have an activity coming up, we ask ourselves, what's everything that we need to have in place to prepare for that activity? And we can use ChatGPT as a brainstorming tool to help us enhance our pool planning and basically make us think of anything we might have missed so we don't end up with forgetting something, not having something in place, we end up with delays and other cost blowouts. Now, as an example, say the earthworks component of our project's coming up. So I've asked ChatGPT, prepare a checklist for the upcoming earthworks activities. Help me think through everything that's going to come up, everything we need to have in place to ensure the works go smoothly. And ChatGPT has prepared a massive checklist we can use to plan for that activity. In addition to helping us plan for activities and manage costs that way, we can also use ChatGPT to keep track of costs. Tracking costs is a critically important part of construction cost control because we need to know how and when we're spending money. How we can use ChatGPT, we could upload a bunch of invoices to it and get it to categorize the costs and say allocate these costs to different cost codes. So we get 5 invoices for quarry material, and we want it to get it to summarize these costs and allocate them to a cost code. We could use it for that, or we could also use it for earned value calculations. So earned value calculations are where we track our actual costs, we compare it to our planned performance, and we calculate a series of metrics to understand how the project's progressing. So we can also use ChatGPT to help us keep control of our budget like that. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT, what are some metrics we could track during the earthworks to help us stay on control of our budget? So it's got productivity metrics, so we could track volume of earthworks, we could track cost metrics like daily expenditure, and it's come up with a list of metrics we can refer to help us track and keep on top of our budgets. That's one use. This is more of like a brainstorming use of ChatGPT. But as I said, we could also upload earthworks dockets, earthworks invoices, and get them to allocate them to costs, and actually get them to perform and track these metrics. Okay, so why do projects blow their budgets? Well, it comes down to a couple of reasons in my experience. One is poorly planning, so not thinking through everything that has to be in place to complete an activity, the activity start, things aren't ready, people sit around waiting for tools, equipment, materials, we blow costs like that. Second thing is that activities aren't scheduled correctly, so they're not planned in sequence. People come to site, things aren't ready for them, so we need to sequence activities correctly. But also, people don't allocate responsibility and track their budgets. In all these functions, ChatGPT can aid and assist. Ultimately, it's going to come down to your creativity and how you can think to implement it using core tools of ChatGPT. But as we've seen, we can use it to allocate budgets to individuals, to allocate costs. We can use it to help us plan and prepare for upcoming activities. In this video, I want to discuss some different ways you can use ChatGPT to help you plan and schedule construction projects. Project scheduling is the tools and processes we use to ensure our project finishes on time. So it's basically everything we do for our construction project to ensure that it finishes within the project timeframe. So the allowable duration for the project consists of tools like developing schedules, implementing a schedule, monitoring and controlling the schedule. The schedule is the tool we use to do this. So the schedule helps us calculate the duration of the project. So when we develop a schedule, we work out how long the project is going to take to complete. Once that project duration is fixed, it helps us to then sequence and coordinate the works to make sure activities occur on the dates that they're planned to. It helps us keep our stakeholders informed and understand the current project progress. It helps us to estimate and control costs. We can use the schedule to estimate our indirect costs. And then we can use the schedule during construction to help us plan and prepare for different activities. And it also helps to make decisions when things change during the course of the project. So the schedule is a fundamental project management tool. Some different ways you can use ChatGPT to enhance this process include understanding the development process. So scheduling is quite a technical activity. There's a lot of different terminologies and project management processes that you should use to develop a schedule. ChatGPT can be useful to understand these processes. ChatGPT can also be useful with the initial schedule creation. It can help with once you then move into project delivery, allocating and sequencing tasks, so that can help with implementing the schedule. And then also during construction, when you're monitoring and control the schedule, you can also use ChatGPT to help with data and schedule analysis. So the first use case of ChatGPT for project scheduling I'll talk about is actually using ChatGPT to understand key scheduling concepts like the critical path, like floats, and the actual processes we use to create a schedule. So this is going to be where you use ChatGPT to actually understand the technical side of project scheduling. So a really simple example, I've asked ChatGPT, how would I develop a project schedule? It's told me to define the scope, break the scope down into a work breakdown structure, estimate the activity duration, sequence the activities, set milestones, review and optimize, and so on and so forth. So you can actually get ChatGPT to teach you how to schedule, which is a bit of a shortcut from doing a whole lot of research yourself, but it's probably one of the best use cases I find for ChatGPT, which is just understanding new concepts, particularly technical concepts. It's incredibly good at explaining. So the next use I want to talk about is actually setting up and beginning to develop a schedule. So you can use ChatGPT to develop a work breakdown structure. And the key here is you want to prompt ChatGPT so that data, the structure it gives you, the output, matches whatever scheduling software you're using. So if you're using Microsoft Project, or if you're using a specific Gantt chart template, you want to make sure data that ChatGPT is giving you reflects that structure. Once you've set up the work breakdown structure, you can then use ChatGPT to extend on this to allocate and sequence tasks. So you extend the work breakdown structure to understand the resourcing, the sequence of the different activities, and also to determine the resource requirements for different activities. So you use ChatGPT to set up your initial work breakdown structure, the list of tasks that you need to complete the project. Then you can use ChatGPT to sequence these tasks, get them to tell you the order they need to be completed in, and tell you what resources you need. Here, I've asked ChatGPT, can you please turn the schedule into work breakdown structure format with activity ID and so on and so forth. So it's taken our example of project, the Gateway Expansion project. It's got an activity code, an activity task, a duration, and also a predecessor for every activity. It's listed out all the tasks we need to complete the project, estimated duration, and it's put in there a predecessor activity. Okay, so we've used ChatGPT to create a project schedule. The next thing you can use it for is data analysis. So you can use ChatGPT to analyze data or data from the schedule and get it to understand the implications, perform earned value management calculations, and basically perform data analysis on the schedule to provide you insights that you can use to manage the schedule better. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT how many inclement weather days should we allow in the schedule if we're performing this project in Melbourne, Australia. It's looked at historical weather days, the average number of rainy days per month, and then based on the time period of our project, it's told us how many inclement weather days to allow if the project occurs in different seasons. So we've used ChatGPT rather than having to research and find the data ourselves. We've used ChatGPT to find this information for us. Then, once we've collected a whole lot of data, we've created our list of tasks, put them in the correct order, found any additional information we need, we could export all this information into a Gantt chart. Key point here, as I mentioned before, is you want to make sure the data that ChatGPT gives you, you're giving it the correct prompts so you can simply copy and paste the information you've been provided into the schedule model. So here I've got the data from my schedule model. It's given me the activities, the activity names, the start dates, the dependencies, and the durations of all the activities. And I've told it to give it in the format that I'll copy it into my table. So I've made sure the format it's giving me matches the Gantt chart I'm using. So this is just a simple Excel Gantt chart I've used. And I've asked for the information to give me in terms of the activities, the start dates, finish dates, and the duration. So I can simply just extract the data from ChatGPT and copy it in rather than having to do some additional level of data processing. So just make sure when you're telling ChatGPT, whatever scheduling software you're using, like Microsoft Project, Primavera P6, whatever you're using, just make sure you're prompting it to give you the data in the correct format. Okay, in my experience, the biggest challenges to project scheduling that I regularly see is making sure the schedule is accurate and realistic, maintaining its relevance through the life cycle of the project. So people tend to put a lot of effort up front in developing a perfect schedule, but they fail to maintain it during project delivery. And then also communicating the schedule with stakeholders. These are the things that, in my experience, projects struggle with the most. So the first, accuracy and realism. I've already shown that we can use ChatGPT to create a work breakdown structure, refine it, and check it so it can help us to take all the information we need for our project, compile it together, and reflect this in the structure of the schedule. Using ChatGPT, it's easy to make updates and feedback so we can help to maintain the relevance of the schedule. And then also something I didn't mention during this, but if we have a big, messy schedule with hundreds of lines, we could also put this into ChatGPT and get it to extract key milestones that are relevant to specific stakeholders. So if you can imagine, we're working on a road project. We have a schedule with 2,000 different lines, but all our stakeholder wants to know is disruption to the area of the road out the front of the school. We could then extract the key milestones of the schedule for this specific stakeholder. So that's a use case you could use to enhance communication. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can use ChatGPT to enhance procurement. Out of all the different construction management functions, estimating, scheduling, cost control, I find ChatGPT probably has the most relevant and most uses within the contracts and procurement space. Why is that? Because procurement contracts, it's all about writing, creating content, checking documents, making documents correct and align. So there's actually a lot of uses for procurement and contract management within ChatGPT. Okay, so what is procurement? Procurement is the process of finding and acquiring external goods and services we need for the project. So if you can imagine, massive construction project, we need steel reinforcement, we need a concreting subcontractor, we need an electrical contractor. Procurement is a process we go through to find and acquire these external services. So it's writing a scope of work, sending it out to the market, getting quotes, all of these functions. Why does procurement matter so much? It's because external contractors make up a significant portion of the total dollar value of any project. Any significantly big construction project is too big for a single company to complete in-house. They need to engage external suppliers and vendors to complete portions of the work. And if you add up the total cost spent on all these external parties, it's going to be a large portion of the total dollar value of the project. And the suppliers and subcontractors we choose are going to have an impact on cost, they're going to have an impact on scope, they're going to have an impact on time, and they're going to have an impact on quality and safety as well. So procurement is going to impact every outcome from the project. The other reason I think procurement is particularly important is because it's actually quite difficult to do well. We fall into this trap of thinking we get 3 quotes, we choose the cheapest quote. What's so hard about that? Well, it's because the cheapest subcontractor, the cheapest quote, is often not always the best. We need to understand how people have priced things. We need to understand the reputation of the subcontractor. There's a lot of different factors we need to consider, and whether we choose good or bad subcontractors is going to drastically impact the outcomes of the project. So what is the procurement process? Well, first we need to plan procurement. We need to work out what we need to procure. We need to prepare a tender package. So we'll be writing a scope of works, putting together a pricing schedule, compiling all the drawings and specifications. We'll then need to send this out to the market to get quotes from potential subcontractors and vendors. And then we'll need to negotiate and finalize a contract. ChatGPT can help across all of these stages of the project lifecycle. So in the planning phase, we can use ChatGPT to help us create a work breakdown structure. So decompose the project scope into component pieces, select an optimal delivery strategy for that portion of the work, so an optimal contracting strategy, and also to help us create a procurement register. Okay, from the example project scope we've trained ChatGPT on, I've asked it, can you please create a procurement register? And I've told it to list out all the different subcontracts, all the different things we're going to have to acquire from the market. So it's talking about excavation equipment, fuel, erosion control, because I told it we were self-performing the earthworks. It's told us, because we're self-performing the guardrail as well, we need to buy all the guardrail equipment. And then because we're subcontracting the electrical works, it's told us we need to hire an electrical subcontractor. So ChatGPT has taken the project scope and it's helped us create a procurement register. Okay, once we've planned procurement, the next step in the process is to prepare a tender package. So ChatGPT can help us to prepare all the tender documentation. We all know how good ChatGPT is at writing and preparing documents, so we can get it to use it to help us write a scope of works and prepare the specific different tender documents that go into the package, like a pricing schedule or like safety documentation. So here for our project for the electrical scope of works, I've asked ChatGPT to write a detailed scope of works for the procurement of the electrical subcontractor. It's given us an introduction, it's got a project overview, and it's written a detailed scope of work. So it wants help with planning and design. The subcontractor is responsible for procuring materials, completing the installation works, and then finally testing and commissioning and ensuring safety and compliance. So again, the more information we give ChatGPT, the better description we can give of what we want the specific scope of works to cover. Obviously, it's going to do a better job, but even here, when I've given it very little context or background, it's had a good first cut at writing a scope of works. Once we've then prepared our tender documentation, sent them out to the market, we then want to assess quotes. So ChatGPT can help us to create a structure for assessing quotes, so a multivariate tender assessment tool, so we make sure we're choosing the right subcontractors. And also for a specific subcontractor's quote, which are they this is quite a good use case of ChatGPT. We can upload the quote and get it to review the quote or the subcontractor's letter of offer and to find any departures or any variances from our scope of work. So rather than going through the document manually, we could upload the example quote from the subcontractor and get it to check what are the departures from our package of work. As an example, here I'm using ChatGPT and I'm asking it, what criteria should we use to assess the tender package? It's talking about quality, cost, value for money, schedule, resource availability, risk management. It's basically given us a whole checklist we can go through, compare this to the quote we've been provided by the subcontractor to really see whether we're getting value for money. And finally, once we've got our quotes, we've chosen our preferred subcontractor, we could use ChatGPT to help us with the contract formation process. We could use ChatGPT, although in reality, you wouldn't want to rely on this to actually prepare a contract. But also more useful, I'd say, is we can use ChatGPT to negotiate departures and determine the critical at-risk clauses that the subcontractor wants to depart from. As an example here, I've asked ChatGPT to write a contract we could use to hire the electrical subcontractor, but as I said, I wouldn't be relying on a ChatGPT drafted contract. This is more or less just an example to show you how extensive its commercial knowledge is, and you can use it for all sorts of things. The biggest challenges to effective procurement that I regularly see are first scope, so clearly defining what we want to procure. And we've already seen how ChatGPT can help us to draft scope of works. We can train it on the project documents so that it makes sure all the scope relevant to a specific subcontract's covered. The second challenge I see is creating the specific tender packages and making sure the scopes align and they cover all aspects of the project scope, so we can use ChatGPT to help us develop a procurement register that covers all of the activities in the project scope. Then finally, once we get quotes back, not performing a proper gap analysis. So we can use ChatGPT to upload quotes we received, check over the quotes, and to identify any departures. But again, any uses you can think of based on those core functionalities that ChatGPT have will be effective. In this video, I want to talk about how you can use ChatGPT for contract management. Like with procurement, there's a lot of use cases for ChatGPT to effectively manage contracts. That's because contracts, by their nature, involve big, wordy documents, lots of information, lots of supporting attachments. There's a lot of uses for ChatGPTs, both being able to train it on a large amount of documents, ask it questions about the documents, and also to check there's no misalignments or issues with scope, with schedules, with these sorts of things. So there's a lot of use cases with ChatGPT with contract management. So I define contract management and I separate the term from procurement because some people define procurement and contracts the same, but I think they're distinct functions. So contract management I define as managing all the contractual relationships that form part of the project. So both the head contract and the subcontract. So procurement is more or less a subset of subcontract formation, but because it forms it's such an important role, I've sort of broken it out as its own process. But contract management, it's managing all of the contractual relationships on the project. So why does contract management matter? Well, in practice on construction projects, contracts drive everything we do. The head contract determines what we get paid from the client, and our subcontracts determine what we spend to deliver the project scope. ChatGPT has specific uses in contract management across both drafting and reviewing contracts. However, I probably wouldn't be using it to write contracts, negotiating contracts, administrating contracts, and then making contractual claims. So when things change, how to use ChatGPT to help you form contractual claims. So ChatGPT can help with the actual contract drafting process. So this could be writing and preparing a contract, preparing the supporting documentation, or even just reviewing a contract someone sent you against specific limits of authority. So you can use ChatGPT in the contract formation process. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT previously to draft a contract, and I've told it I want the contract to have liquidated damages of $1,000 a day and specific payment terms of 30 days. ChatGPT has gone through and redrafted the contract to have these specific terms. However, in reality, you wouldn't probably be using ChatGPT to draft a contract, but you could upload a sample contract that someone sent you and get it to check these specific terms. So after the contract formation process, through the contract negotiation process, you can also use ChatGPT. You could use it to track exclusions and sources of disagreement, identifying and mitigating contractual risks. So this is where we use it to review a contract and identify key clauses that you're unhappy with or that would pose risk or to your organization. Could use it to then track meeting minutes and document these during a meeting, and also use it for real-time advice and direction. So as you're reviewing a contract, you could ask it questions and get it to explain concepts to you. As an example, say you're negotiating a contract with liquidated damages of $1,000 a day for your subcontractor, and we still want to motivate the subcontractor to finish early with the liquidated damages, but you want to understand what other clauses you could use in the contract to help them to finish on time, but without having the liquidated damages. So I've asked ChatGPT to give me some suggestions of different ways it could motivate the subcontractor to finish on time without liquidated damages. And it spoke about things like an early completion bonus. So it's given some contractual advice. Once you've signed and negotiated a contract and you move into the project execution phase, ChatGPT can help you to administrate a contract. So it can help you just simply with meeting minutes and recording documentation. I find during project execution, you have the contract gets signed, and then all these things change during project delivery. Particularly, things are discussed, things change. So you can use ChatGPT to record and document all your correspondence. You can use it to maintain contractual documentation. So use it as a pool of information and ask it questions about specific clauses or specific supporting documents. And you can also use ChatGPT to monitor performance. As an example, when administrating a contract, the subcontractor is going to have to regularly provide information. Here, I've asked ChatGPT what information does the subcontractor have to regularly provide as a progress update, and it's told me it has to provide the work schedule for next week, a report of labor and equipment, basically a list of things that I would need each week from the subcontractor to administrate this contract. So here, I'm just using it to research and understand the contract because I've trained it on the specific contract. During projects, things can and will change, which is likely to lead to claims and disputes. ChatGPT can help with this process as well, managing the claims process, determining cause and effect. I think this is actually quite a good use of ChatGPT where you've trained it on data that is within the contract and you can ask it specific questions about things, can perform an impact analysis to understand the impact of a change, and also give you legal advice and dispute resolution if things are turning really sour. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT that we got into a dispute with our subcontractor about delayed design, and we want to send an email to the subcontractor referring to the contract whether this is or not entitled to a variation. ChatGPT has written an email to referring to the submission of quality and completions, mutual cooperation, and referring to a range of reasons why the subcontractor is not entitled to a variation. So you can see here, we're using ChatGPT to manage a potential claim from a subcontractor. It's referring to the contract to help it do this. When I see projects struggle with contract management, I really see it in three areas. So scope, transferring technical scope and requirements and translating that into a contract. As we've discussed, ChatGPT can help you drafting scopes of works, preparing documents, and training it on the project information. So it can help you to define scope better, can help you to then align both parties on specific contractual terms. So often there's disputes about specific terms like liquidated damages. However, the principles behind them, finishing the project on time, ChatGPT can provide you contractual advice to come up with other ways this is possible. And then as well, managing claims objectively and fairly. As we've seen, you can train ChatGPT on the documentation the contract's been developed on and almost use it as an unbiased umpire to provide direction, refer to the contract, and help you provide advice why something is or isn't a variation. But really, again, with anything, you come up with your own uses, just start using it, try experimenting with it, and you'll get to find some useful applications. In this video, I want to talk about how you can use ChatGPT for construction quality management. Fundamentally, quality management is about checking and verifying that what we're building is correct. So in this video, I'll talk about how you can use ChatGPT and some of the functions of ChatGPT to help improve this process. Now, officially, the definition of quality management is about verifying and checking requirements. But if we talk about specifically in the construction environment, Quality management is the process of verifying and validating what we're building matches the drawing. So we get a set of plans, we get a set of specifications. It's our job to build according to these specifications, and quality management is about verifying and validating that what we're building matches the requirements in the drawings and the project specifications. There's two broad process groups to quality management. There's planning, so setting up our quality management systems, processes before we start works, and then as we move into project delivery, we move into quality, or what I refer to as quality administration. That's why we're following the plan, doing our checks. So planning is where we write our inspection and test plans, set up our work breakdown structure. Then during delivery is where we actually complete our inspection and test plans, compile our testing documents, get our client to approve it. So that's administrating quality. Okay, so to begin with, if we're talking about setting up our quality management systems, how can we use ChatGPT? Well, the first one, which ChatGPT is incredibly good at, is understanding standards and specifications. So for example, if we're writing an inspection and test plan on installing underground electrical conduits, we could use ChatGPT to help us research relevant standards and specifications. The second one, we could use it to help us prepare a quality management plan and other quality documents. We could use the content creating and writing function of ChatGPT. And then finally, specifically, we could use it to prepare inspection and test plans. Now, if we think about the process of writing an ITP, we could train our own ChatGPT or just a general ChatGPT on the process to follow to prepare an inspection and test plan. We could upload the project documents, the relevant specifications, tell it the scope of the ITP we're writing, and getting it to produce us a structured ITP in the format we want it. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT, based on Australian concrete standards, prepare us an inspection and test plan for concrete placement and output it in a table. It's gone ahead and done it. It's given us an ITP. It's broken it down into pre-placement, concrete delivery, checking the materials are correct, concrete placement, and all the steps, the inspection and test activity, and the relevant standards and who has to approve it. Just from that simple prompt, it's given us this output. We could give it more information. We could give it the project-specific requirements. We could give it drawings. However, it's not going to be able to read drawings. It can refer to the notes on the drawings. And yeah, as simple as that, we can get it to write us an ITP, which we can review and optimize. Once we move into the delivery phase, there's then a couple of different ways we could use ChatGPT. So we've written all our inspection and test plans, we've planned quality for the project, we then move into the execution phase. What are the ways we can use ChatGPT during project delivery? Well, the first one, we can use it to manage and coordinate inspection and testing. Now, this is often an overlooked part of quality management. It's such a big part, actually coordinating the works day to day, is organizing the relevant inspection and testing activities. So you could give ChatGPT a copy of the project schedule or a copy of your 3-week look ahead and say, based on these activities that are coming up, the relevant testing requirements in our ITP, what days do we have to schedule inspections from the client? Or what days do we have to schedule inspections from the proof engineer? Now, ChatGPT could help us prepare a list of dates that then we send to the proof engineer. That's one simple use. We could use it to help us prepare non-conformance reports. So when there's defects, when there's failures to meet the quality standards, typically we prepare a non-conformance report or NCR. We could use ChatGPT to help us prepare these documents. Then also, if we are getting a significant number of defects, if we're getting a significant number of issues in our project, we could use ChatGPT to help us prepare a root cause analysis to look at all the data from our defects and categorize them. So here I've told ChatGPT, based on the upcoming schedule provided, what day do we have to book in proof rolls? ChatGPT has gone ahead, it's read the schedule, it's got the dates for when we're doing the specific construction activities, and then it's suggested a proof roll frequency and the key dates that we should schedule in the proof roll. So we're using ChatGPT to help us work out what dates we have to complete our quality control activities. Okay, to wrap up, the 3 biggest challenges that I see in construction quality management: number one, understanding requirements and all the specific standards that apply to the work we're doing. Now, as I've said, we can use ChatGPT, we can train it on the project-specific documents, and we can also use it to help us research general standards and specifications. So ChatGPT is going to help us understand the specific requirements for the construction activity we're doing. The next one is managing documentation. Now, lots of different test documents, lots of different records are produced during a construction activity. We can train ChatGPT on all this data and it can help us to find the relevant document we're looking for. And finally is progressive management. So once we move into the construction phase, staying on top of and organizing all the inspection and testing. I've already spoken about how we can use ChatGPT to link the schedule with the testing requirements to help us produce a list of dates we need specific inspections for. So ChatGPT is going to help with all these functions to help us overall improve our quality management on the project. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can use ChatGPT to help you close out and complete a construction project. Construction projects are massive ordeals. They involve design, construction, commissioning, lots of different trades, lots of different activities, and generally a project developer will pay a contractor to coordinate and manage all of these different tasks. Now, the end of the job, there becomes this massive process of actually closing out and finishing the project, making sure all our quality paperwork's done, making sure our handover inspections are being completed, making sure the work's 100% done, there's no minor outstanding works, and that we've coordinated and got all of the relevant building permits and approvals. That massive set of tasks in construction management we wrap under a central topic we call completions management. So completions we define as the process of handing over a finished construction project back to the owner or client. We can use ChatGPT a couple of different ways to help us enhance the completions process on our project. So we can use ChatGPT to better understand the requirements of completion so we can train it on the project documents and specifications, similar to how we'd use it for quality management. And then we can help ChatGPT to understand what the specific completions requirements are. So there might be requirements in the contract, there might be requirements in quality documentation, there might be requirements in project specifications. We can get it to help us compile and understand all of these different requirements. We can use ChatGPT to help us then turn this into completion and close out checklists. So we could create checklists for specific disciplines like electrical, mechanical, civil, and complete these checklists to make sure that we've fulfilled all of these requirements. We can use ChatGPT to help us track and manage a punch list, which is a record of all the outstanding works and defects we have. And then finally, we can use ChatGPT training the operations and maintenance team, helping them understand what we've built and performing our training requirements as a contractor. So to use ChatGPT to help us to understand requirements, we can review the contract and identify completions requirements. We can prepare a requirements register. We can transfer these requirements into a schedule or dates we have to complete these requirements. And then we can allocate these tasks to individuals. This is typically what we'd call completions or requirements management. We can actually use ChatGPT to perform each of these individual steps. Based on the project scope that we've trained ChatGPT on, I've asked it to create a list of completions requirements talking about handover works, materials, whether we have to provide spare parts, any final inspection and testing, so closing off the quality assurance, creating documentation and reports, and a final site cleanup and tidy up. So ChatGPT, based on the documentation we've provided it, has prepared a list of things we need to do to close out and complete the project. Now that we've understood all of these individual completions requirements, we can take this a step further and use ChatGPT to help us create individual checklists for each of the different trades and disciplines in detail, trained on the project documents that tell us exactly what we need to do to complete the project. So we can create a checklist for the physical completion of the works, and then we can break this checklist down by trade or package. So this is going to help us take these requirements, add more detail into them, and then to have a tangible list of things we need to do for each discipline to complete the project. For example, I've asked ChatGPT to create a checklist for the street lighting contractor once they've finished the works, and ChatGPT has gone ahead, it's created a table and an extensive list of everything from documentation handover to final inspection to completion of the construction works. We can follow through this checklist to check that the street lighting contractor has correctly completed the work and that scope of the project can be finished. The next thing we can use ChatGPT for is to help us track and manage a punch list. So a punch list is a list of all the outstanding defects and work at the completion of the work. So typically you'd complete an inspection and test plan through your quality management process. Any failures to meet the quality standards or any outstanding works picked up when you're completing your inspection and testing, you transfer to the punch list. So ChatGPT can help us to track and manage our punch list, send out a summary to stakeholders, and then use photos as records for defect management. So as an example, I'm using the photo capability of ChatGPT. I've uploaded a photo and I've asked it to tell me what's wrong with this picture and what items should we add to the punch list to cover this activity on. So it's told us the line marking's wrong, the branch needs to be removed. So you can actually upload images to ChatGPT and transfer these into a punch list. And finally, another use of ChatGPT during the completions phase could be to help with the training and handover to operations and maintenance. So a big part at the end of a construction project will be handing over and transferring from construction to O&M. And typically there's a contractual requirement for contractors to prepare some sort of training and operations and maintenance documents. We can use ChatGPT to help us prepare a training presentation for the O&M staff. We can also use it to help us write an operations and maintenance manual. As an example, I asked ChatGPT, based on the project scope, create a training presentation for the O&M team, and it's gone through and it's listed out all the different activities, the scope they need to understand, explain the project scope, and covered the key operations and maintenance details they need. So in literally a matter of seconds, I've just turned the project scope into a training presentation for the O&M team. Okay, so what are the biggest challenges that I see to handing over construction projects, and how can ChatGPT help us address this? So the first one is that people fail to correctly identify all of the completions requirements early on in the project. So as we've seen, you can train ChatGPT on your project documents and you can help it to review all the contractual, all the requirements and the project specifications and turn these into a list of completions requirements. The next thing is maintaining focus during project delivery. So people fail to identify requirements, but then also during project delivery, people don't think of completions. They're too caught up, they're too focused on construction. So we can use ChatGPT to ensure focus is maintained through the project by understanding the project schedule, understanding the completions requirements, and then putting together a plan of when all these requirements need to be met. The next one we could use is preparing documentation. So we've seen that we can use it to prepare an O&M training plan, or you can use it to prepare an operations and maintenance training manual. And the final thing is you can use ChatGPT to help you manage and close out your punch list. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can use ChatGPT to help manage risks on your construction project. Risk management is the process of managing the uncertainty that matters to the project. So projects, by their definition, occur in uncertain environments. When we're planning a project, we don't know if materials are going to get delayed, whether it's going to rain, how much it's going to rain, whether there's going to be some other extreme weather event that impacts process, or whether there's going to be an industrial relations issue partway through the job. There's all these different things that can play out that it's impossible to know when we're planning the project. Risk management, broadly, the set of processes we use to prepare for and deal with unknown and unknowable circumstances. The risk management process typically goes as follows. We start with identifying the risks that are relevant to the project. So we need to identify the uncertainty that matters to our project. The second thing we need to do is assess both the severity of the risk and the likelihood of impact. Then we need to mitigate the risks, so plan what we're going to do about the identified risks. And then finally, monitor how we're tracking against these risks and identify new risks during project delivery. So we begin with identifying risks, we assess the severity and likelihood, then we come up with mitigations for the risks. So we need to monitor the risk responses, and during project delivery, constantly iterate this through this process of identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks. How can we use ChatGPT to enhance our risk identification? First thing we can use it for is brainstorming. So coming up with a comprehensive list of different risks applicable to the project. So as part of risk identification, we need to identify all the possible risks. So ChatGPT, I've found, is incredibly good at helping you to brainstorm and come up with a superset of ideas. We can then use it to facilitate discussions. So use it to engage stakeholders and prompt risks from there. So we could generate a list of questions or topics that we can send to stakeholders like a survey to get them to input and come up with possible risks, and then use this to develop a risk register. So we can use ChatGPT to help us come up with a superset of possible risks. As an example, for our project, I've just asked ChatGPT, based on its understanding of the project documents, develop a risk register, and it's come up with a whole lot of different risks, and it's actually gone to the next step and categorized them based on severity and likelihood. After we've come up with our superset of risks, we then need to rate these based on probability and impact. So ChatGPT can help us do this by performing and extending some additional analysis of the risks, as we've already seen. It can do this based on qualitative assessment, so making general judgments about what ChatGPT believes to be the most likely risks, but then also performing some sort of quantitative assessment. So whether you then perform a detailed calculation, like for example, how much rain you're going to have, you could look at historical data and perform some sort of quantitative assessment like a Monte Carlo analysis. As an example of a quantitative risk assessment, I've just asked ChatGPT based on its understanding the project duration, the area the project's in, the number of the rain days we're likely to get, can you perform a Monte Carlo simulation to help us work out how many inclement weather days to include in our schedule? And it's gone ahead and given us some code we could run VBA or a macro to help us perform this calculation in detail. So once we've identified our risks, we've assessed them based on severity and likelihood, we next need to come up with mitigation plans. So what are we going to do about these risks? We've identified them and assessed them. That's all well and good. But if we don't do anything to address them, then we're not really managing them, are we? So in this sense, ChatGPT can help us to come up with detailed response plans to these risks. So it can help us come up with plans of what we're going to do about them, then allocate resources, so both budget, schedule duration for individuals in the project team to then help us actually go ahead and manage these risks. As an example from ChatGPT, I've asked it, for the key project risks, can you come up with a list of planned risk responses? And so for example, delays in obtaining permits, it's come up with an action plan to apply for permits early and establish a good relationship with the permitting authority. So it's just looking at the risks we've identified, biggest problems we can have, and then come up with mitigations plans. So those are two actionable things we could now do to address the risk of being delayed in obtaining permits. So once we've developed our risk management and our risk mitigation, we then need to monitor and control the risks. So we've moved from the planning phase into the delivery phase. We now need to make sure we're staying on top of our risks, and then we're also constantly iterating back through that cycle of identifying new risks as they come up. So you can use ChatGPT to maintain the risk register, add in or remove risks as new situations come up, and then also to update our response plan. So as new things happen, we can tell ChatGPT about it and get it to update the risk register accordingly. For example, I've told ChatGPT that we're now 50% of the way through the project, and we've asked it to then update the risk register. So as we're 50% of the way through, it's adjusted how much inclement weather allowance we should have left. Now that we've actually started work, we don't have that same risk about delaying and obtaining permits. So ChatGPT has gone up and it's updated the risk register based on our current project progress to help keep it relevant. Okay, so what are the biggest challenges to effective risk management that I see, and how can ChatGPT help us to overcome them? The first one is identifying all the risks relevant to the project. We've already seen how ChatGPT is incredibly effective at brainstorming and help us to come up with supersets of ideas. So we can use ChatGPT, even if a lot of the risks it'll come up with might not be relevant, the specifics of our scope, we can still use it to come up and brainstorm a superset of ideas. The next thing we can use ChatGPT for is to come up with effective response plans. A lot of the time people are aware of a risk, but they don't come up with a plan of how to manage it. You can use ChatGPT again, the brainstorming function, to come up with a superset of risks and response plans. We can then use ChatGPT to help us appropriately allocate contingency to these different risks. And then instead of just creating the risk register when we've got time at the beginning of the project and then forgetting about it during delivery, we can help it to quickly update and make it relevant. In this video, I'm just going to do a really quick summary and recap of what we covered. Now, the purpose of this isn't to go through anything in detail. It's much better to go back and watch the original lectures. The purpose is just to remind you of what we've gone through to hopefully give you a bit of context as you move forward to trying to apply these things in the real world. The course was broken down into three main sections. So we started with the basics of ChatGPT, what it is, how to use it. Then we looked at specific uses of ChatGPT. So not necessarily relevant to construction management, but just how to use ChatGPT, different ways you can use it for prompting, you can use it for brainstorming, researching topics, these sorts of things. Then we finished off by going through each of the domains of construction management and looking at specific uses of ChatGPT. When we looked at the basics of ChatGPT, we covered what ChatGPT is, the capabilities and limitations of ChatGPT, how to set up ChatGPT, and then we spoke about the case study we were going to be going through for the duration of the course. In the next section, we went through and we looked at specific uses of ChatGPT. So not applicable to construction management, just generic ways to use ChatGPT to get the most out of it. Now, the purpose of going through these, rather than looking at specific applications first, was to encourage you to understand how to use ChatGPT so you can come up with your own unique and creative ways of doing things. So we spoke about prompting, writing and content creation, summarizing information, communication, data analysis, brainstorming, and education. Now, these core uses of ChatGPT, it's your job to come up with creative ways to use and apply these on your projects. Then in section 3, we spoke about specific applications to construction management. So we looked at how we can use ChatGPT to manage project scope, design, estimating, cost control, scheduling, risk, completions, quality, contracts, and procurement. So these are all of the core domains of construction project management. And then I gave some examples of specific uses. Now, as you're going through these, you probably thought of 5 better ways you could use it than what I've covered and specific uses for your project. So a key takeaway is, based on the examples you've seen, start using ChatGPT and trying to come up with your own specific use cases. So just to wrap up, thank you so much for giving me your time and attention and taking the course. Honestly, really appreciate it, and I really value any feedback that you've got on how to make the course better. Now, I'm super interested in how people come up with unique ways to use ChatGPT. So I'd love to hear if you've come up with any unique ways that are better than the way I'm doing it, that are smarter, more creative, then please send me an email. Please let me know how you found ChatGPT to be most applicable to your project.